All right, hello. This is another one of the just kind of general discussions with people I've been doing. This time we have viewer Novelezra, and I originally turned down his offer because I thought he just had a few questions for me of stuff I had kind of gone over before in the video chats. So then he came back at me with a lot more questions. So I figured, okay, we have enough for a conversation here. This is almost the equivalent of just kind of picking somebody from the audience that wanted to talk, like when they hand somebody the microphone at conventions. So I think it's going to be kind of like that. It may not be that different from the video chat questions, but a lot of the questions we have are gaming related. So this is going to be kind of just a casual game discussion thing here. So, yeah, and the chat's saying it's altercation time. So that's from the Cult
Exactly.
Tycoon
Yeah.
episode. So yeah, you. I guess go ahead and give any sort of intro to yourself that you want people to know.
Yeah. I'm just a fan and a viewer. I'm hoping to start looking into like the history of like YouTube creators and like try and start a podcast where I'm trying to interview people. Because one thing I've noticed is that like we're losing the history of certain things. Like a lot of like video game developers are dying before we get the chance to like interview them. And I was like, well, we could get that with YouTubers. A lot of YouTubers present themselves and their content, but they're obviously not censoring themselves, but they're showing a certain side of themselves, like that they never get questioned. And it's not like influencers and stuff like that, or like musicians. Musicians get lots of interviews and things like that, but YouTubers they put out their content and then like someone might put a comment, and if they're lucky, they might get a response or see a tweet or something. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of YouTubers who have stopped like even doing videos and stuff, and I just think like this is a good way to get used to being on camera and maybe start my own thing.
Well, well, I remember when Steven Spielberg made Saving Private Ryan, he was concerned about being able to interview all these World War II vets before they died off. So I think you have a larger window than that. So
They're not in their 90s, but
yeah. Well, it's still they were getting up there. I mean, World War II vets, but yeah, that sounds similar to that.
yeah.
Um, okay, is there anything else you wanted to? We'll give you some links and stuff at the end and on the
Yeah,
YouTube video.
I'll just put on your Twitter like my Twitter, and
Okay,
you can find
if
pretty
there's
much
anything
everything there.
else you want to announce first, then we'll just jump into the conversation.
No, I think the
Okay,
start
well,
questions.
since you had so many gaming questions, I wanted to ask you a question. What kind of games do you prefer? Like certain genres or themes, or what? A little bit of everything, or
Um, the best way to answer that is I prefer games where it seems like you can tell who made them, if that
oh,
makes
okay,
sense. Like even like one thing I've noticed is like with AAA games, especially like even in the 90s, like you did a review of Sin, and you could tell that the people behind it made the game because it's still like at least 20 people, and you can feel their writing on it.
oh
But
yeah,
nowadays there's like sometimes like 1,000 people working on a game, and even if there's like a director who's got a strong vision, it kind of feels a bit like put by community. So today with like itch.io, you can get a game that's made by one person, and you can feel their vision in it. And I prefer games like that. I feel like I prefer a game where it feels like, oh, I could tell someone made this and it wasn't a robot.
yeah, like a personal touch or style to.
Yeah,
Yeah, and AAA ones, even if you have a director with their style, there might be publishers or producers at the company overseeing that and saying, no, we want this or that. I think you could argue, was it, from what I played of Death Stranding, Hideo Kojima probably still has enough sway to have his touch
maybe
on
too much,
things. I
a
mean,
little bit
for
too
like
much
a
for that one.
AAA title,
Yeah, yeah,
but you're right. That is much rarer at AAA development.
yeah.
Are there any sort of genres or themes that you like, or particular, or just pretty
If
open
I'm
on that?
relaxing, probably just like Metroidvania. Like Metroidvania is a really easy thing to get into. Like you can kind of like put a podcast on or something. I know it sounds bad because you're supposed to concentrate on the game, but there's something about the constant engagement. But and you still get atmosphere for it.
Oh yeah.
I do like, to be honest, I'm mostly just trying older games like for emulation and that kind of thing because, well, because of COVID, there's been a huge lull in AAA, and the ones that have come out have just been, in my opinion, kind of disasters. So, but
I
indie gaming, just anything basically.
I've only been following them somewhat because I treat all new AAA games as just late betas now. So I figure, okay, maybe it'll be
Yeah.
done in a year, even though it's out right now. Like, well, for older games, are you as interested in games that like new games that go for like an older style, like pixel art, or that kind of follow similar sensibilities, or not, or
During the PlayStation, so I'm quite nostalgic for the PlayStation, PS2, that kind of era, like early 3D. Like I really like the look of like not too like. There's a lot of people who are doing like ones that they're trying to look like a PS1 game, but it went through a grinder, which
yeah.
I'm not really
Well,
a fan of. So I
I don't.
prefer smoother. You know, the Dreamcast. If you ever played a
Yeah,
Dreamcast,
yeah. I was gonna say that might not be that inauthentic. Actually, those ones that make them look like they went through a grinder. But I mean, it depends. Like, I mean, there weren't a ton, but well, I'm thinking Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That was like 95% 2D game, and that one looks nice and great. But a lot of the early 3D stuff, I feel like it worked for horror, but because that when you're not exactly even sure what you're looking at,
oh, absolutely.
then it works. But it kind of has like this found footage feel to it almost.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of them it can be kind of rough for PlayStation. Or I guess the ones that can kind of work are like the 2.5D, like Resident Evil, or I think Chrono Cross was like that, where you have like a 2D rendered background, but then the characters are in 3D.
I absolutely adore pre-rendered backgrounds. Like for me, pre-rendered backgrounds are like one of the most beautiful. Like you did what game was it? The Black Mirror. For me,
Yeah,
that is like I don't think games really look better than that personally. Like when you get a pre-rendered background and you can make it into like an art piece. I don't know, personally, I like we'll probably get onto this later, but Resident Evil 2, the original, when I played the remake, I couldn't believe how disappointed in it I was
oh
and
really?
how it completely Resident Evil 2 the original, in my opinion, like it looks beautiful, it sounds beautiful. It's it's a bit cheesy, but it brings you in. Like, I think there's a YouTuber called Neryl and he talks about how the game feels like a James Cameron movie and it really does. And then I played the new one, and it was like the only way they felt they could set atmosphere was by turning the lights off and putting a torch and letting you use a torch, which to me was just embarrassing. Like there was no darkness in the original, and that had a great atmosphere.
Yeah, I haven't played the new one. I've played the original, and it's my favorite of the Resident Evils I've played.
Yeah,
But yeah, I didn't know that. I've only seen just screenshots, so I assume they
yeah.
were trying to be pretty faithful to it, but maybe they.
No, they cut all the music out, which is
Oh, that's bad.
yeah,
Soundtrack's great for Resident Evil 2.
absolutely fantastic.
The
Like it's one of those.
original also.
Yeah. Like I still remember like walking into the original police station and that like the tones of like piano playing. I can't even remember what happens when you enter the police station in the new one. Yeah, and like you get that pan. You get the pan going up.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I
yeah,
guess the best way to explain it, I like the games where the hardware was limited, and because the hardware was limited, they had to try harder to sell you on things. Like,
yeah,
with Resident Evil 2, they were like, well, we can't make this look like the best thing ever, so we'll paint the backgrounds, we'll make sure the music is good and set to tone. And the new one is they can do whatever they want with it. So they were like, oh, we don't even need to, like bother making it an atmosphere. We'll just turn the lights off, give you a torch so you can't see anything, and there we go, game's done. And it doesn't work, in my opinion. But
I'll have to try it at some point. I mean, I'm curious.
I'd love to hear
Well,
your opinion on it.
yeah, well, because I figure that's a lot of remakes I'm not that interested in unless you're talking really old games. And that's at a good level where just technology wise, there's a lot you can do for remaking the original, the 2.5D kind of
Yeah.
render back, because then you could just kind of open up the world. But I guess if you're veering off a lot off course, then it's kind of becomes something different. But no, I thought that was a good idea to remake that, just because well, it's going to be less accessible to a lot of people with like the tank controls and mostly
Yeah.
just the tank controls. But I guess the graphics for some, I'm pretty open on graphics, but
Oh yeah, I don't think personally, I thought the gameplay was actually excellent. It was absolutely everything else. It was all the stuff that didn't need to be remade. So the controls need to be remade, and like as you said, a lot of younger people aren't going to want to play tank controls or multiple camera angles. The story, in my opinion, didn't need to be changed, and they ruined that.
really,
I don't know.
okay.
I don't. Do you remember in the original where you had to make choices whether you picked up a certain item and it would affect the second playthrough?
Yeah, a little bit though. That I can see some re-engineering on that, because you that only comes into play more if you know there's another playthrough coming and you're connecting
Yeah,
it. Yeah, like I remember my memories are blurry, but I remember like you have to hit a button to open a lab, and then in the second playthrough you can
yeah.
finally open it. And that was actually one of my favorite music themes in the game, going into that lab. Uh,
They removed all of that from the
Man,
remake.
removing the music, that's a big slap in the face there, because like like, in my opinion, the music to like Resident Evil 1 and 2, it's like very slightly a little dated, but it's great. I mean, for mood building and like but like I hate it when, like I mentioned, the Invisible War Deus Ex 2 episode, where the music sounds like it's playing in the next room over, whereas I like stuff really distinctive and can kind of hum along
Yeah.
to it. And
Um, I think we have a lot in common because you really don't like orchestrated soundtracks.
no,
I
that's
don't
not
either.
true. So that's what people are saying. I like it, but I don't like an
When it's bland.
orchestrated remake where like the original was like synth and it sounded awesome.
Yes.
Sometimes that can work. No, no, like you mentioned Black Mirror. That is an orchestrated soundtrack. It's wonderful music in that. You
Yeah,
know,
but I think the music in that is good because the way they record it is it's a guy doing it in a studio, so he can make each instrument sound like sharp. But because they want it to be like, oh, they want to put on the box, we got a symphony orchestra. No offense, a symphony orchestra doesn't sound that great unless you're in front of it. Like a huge symphony orchestra wasn't meant to be recorded on like a microphone and then put on a game. That's why like you listen to Sonic on like the Mega Drive and it uses the Roland. I think it's the MT32, is it? I think, or it might no, it's a Yamaha sound chip. And because it uses a sound chip, it's so sharp and crunchy, and they knew what to do with it that it sounds dated, but it still sounds awesome to listen to.
yeah, yeah. You have very crunchy sound on Sonic. Like just like I remember looking at it, opening an audio editor, and you can see the saw waves on there. Like
Yeah.
it's, but I mean, I would disagree. I mean, yeah, obviously sitting in an orchestra is going to be a different experience, but I mean, I've heard well, again, I'm just to pick one off the top of my head, the Black Mirror. It has an orchestrated soundtrack. I thought it fit the game great. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. I guess when I tend to like it is when nothing's distinctive, like like just now when we mentioned like entering the police station in Resident Evil 2. I remember the notes,
Exactly. Yeah.
whereas well, like I mentioned Deus Ex 2, but there's a lot of other ones. It's like I remember one or two parts, and then the rest just sort of meanders in like just tones, and that can work for some things, but that's not going to be like my favorite soundtrack if that's all it's doing.
Well,
But
Black Mirror does it where it's like you'll have like one or two violins, or maybe a violin and a cello and a piano, but an orchestra is like 12 violins, and unless you write it that each note is distinctive and to the point where you can hear it, but most of the time it's just bop, 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 bop. And you're like, it's kind of boring.
well, it might be a more subtle distinction that I'm noticing too much. But oh yeah, I was gonna say the difference. some synth some synth music sounds just awesome, like when it was written, and like there's very little, if not no, room for improvement. Whereas other times, especially with like, I want to say more on the PC side, because with MIDI music or ad lib, you can hear great notes going on there, but it's like wow, 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 wow. Like it kind of sucks. Whereas sometimes that music, you can tell if they had a symphony orchestra, like let's say they're going for like a fantasy game where you can tell they're trying to sound like strings.
Yeah.
Sometimes renditions of those where the technology was kind of holding it back a little bit, that can sound really good. But it's more, but like you mentioned, Sonic, that's a
Yeah.
game, it was meant for synthesized instruments,
Yeah.
So
Well, the perfect example is Gabriel Knight. So
yeah.
Gabriel Knight 1, obviously MIDI, the music is, in my opinion, is absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's really
Yeah.
good.
And then Robert Holmes redid it himself. He's been like re-releasing his music, and it still sounds amazing, even though he's using, like actual instruments.
I guess I
That's how
haven't
you read
heard.
it.
Yeah, yeah, I think I haven't heard too much of the remake that they did, but I think I listened to a little bit and I wasn't as impressed. But I had taken the MIDI and thrown it into some like really nice sound fonts to try to beef it up even more. And yeah, like the Dixieland drugstore theme, or
Yeah.
the one by the lake when you're.
I
Yeah,
just think the music when you're in the, the main shop is just absolutely.
dun,
Well,
dun,
as a kid, I thought that was and the police. That's probably, in my opinion, the greatest police theme ever made. It's goofy but cool. But Gabriel Knight 2, again, that was a symphony.
yeah,
I think some of it was like MIDI. I
yeah.
can't remember
It's
how
a
good.
lot less distinctive. In fact, the
But
part.
it was quite good, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, from what I remember, well, the part that really stood out to me in Gabriel Knight 2, music wise, was when you finally hear the Lost Symphony, and then
Yeah.
it's the Gabriel Knight theme. Dun, 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 dun. That part cracked me up. Uh, okay, well, I should get to your questions. I guess I got a little
Yes.
derailed because it turns into like a game music discussion.
Hey, that's what we're here for, I guess.
Yeah, well, okay, I guess I only had one other question for you, and then you had a bunch for me.
Yeah.
Was that you may not have an answer to this one. I was just wondering if you had any sort of specific outlook on gaming today, because some people have like real strong opinions on it based on what they do, or
Said, like, in my opinion, indie gaming is absolutely fantastic right now. You can, because we've kind of I hate to say it, COVID has created a work from home culture where you can find someone who does great art or great music and just go on a Discord chat and be like, this is what I want, and these people work together well. That has like killed the AAA industry, where they hate that and they want to get people into offices because they think they don't communicate as well. And also, AAA games at the moment are making so much money from things that don't make the game better, and they're just leaning on it, or they're just making cheaper games like for like phones and that kind of thing. So we've got games. I mean, I can't think what was the last big AAA game. Actually, I've heard Diablo 4 is good, but Blizzard, I know what Blizzard are like. They will never discount that game for like 20 years. I will not be playing Diablo 4 for a very long time because they won't discount it.
yeah, I went and checked. You can get Diablo 3 by itself for $20 now, or
That's
with
really
the expansion for 30. So that's, and I know they have 2 expansions planned for 4. So maybe by the time, so I figure, okay, that's, I guess maybe if I can get it with both expansions for 30, then I'll get around. So I probably won't be playing that anytime soon.
Yeah. So, but what other like big releases have come out? Like, just before this came on, apparently it leaked that they're remastering The Last of Us 2. So that's where Sony's mindset is, where they're like, well, we just released The Last of Us 2 in the last 5 years. Let's re-release that. That's
Well,
where AAA at the moment.
I'm actually okay with that one because that was a former PlayStation exclusive. So if they're bringing these former exclusives over to PC, I am not going to knock them for that.
Well, yeah, that's
They
one
can
of the
keep that
questions.
train going. I mean, for any publisher that wants to do that.
Yeah.
But no, well, I mean, there was a bunch announced at that Summer Games Festival thing, like the not E3, well, one of the various E3 replacements.
The only game I was really looking forward to was the one. It's Sandland, and it's by Dragon Ball Z, that artist. It's his new game, and it looks cool. I mean, that was the only one I was really excited for. That I guess I don't know if it counts as AAA because it's Bandai Namco, and they kind of like they're like AA, I guess. Probably the best way to explain their game. But nothing like huge came out. It was mostly delays, and then they announced like the Final Fantasy remake, which I don't know if that interests you at all, but
Not really, but well, maybe I still haven't played the 7 remake. Oh, that's right. 16 came out, didn't it? Or
yeah, no one's talked about that. Like people are still talking about Pizza Tower, like which was a small team. People are talking about Pizza Tower. Final Fantasy 16 comes out. I haven't heard a single person talk about it except like the people that moaned about it for like 2 days, and then it's just like, oh, no one cares. Which is weird because I grew up when Final Fantasy 8 came out. I remember that like it was yesterday. When Final Fantasy 8 came out, people like crapping themselves.
well,
It's
it
weird.
could just be like the circles that you're getting news on too. Like I tend to just follow like PC game news because I don't want to get overly hyped up over games I can't
Yes.
play. Because
Yeah.
so that's not on a PC yet. It's gonna be like another 6 months or a year or something. But so I don't know. It might depend on your news source. I'd be surprised if there wasn't some mentioning of 16 because I mean Final Fantasy games tend to be pretty big flagship titles.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely made for you because it's no longer turn-based, which I hate to admit it, I
Yeah, they've
adore
done that
turn-based.
since what 13
Fif-
or 15.
No, 13 was kind of turn-based. It had this horrible battle system.
Oh,
You're
okay.
thinking of 14? No,
Well, no,
14's the
14's the
online one.
MMO. I figure those
Yeah,
are kind of
yeah.
separate things.
15 is the one that's like Kingdom Hearts. Like it's like I thought it was okay.
Well, 15 is like the road trip one from everything I've seen. It
Yeah,
looks like
it's.
yeah. I've heard described as boy band road trip.
I think you would actually like that game because it is like a road trip, but then they ruin it near the end by just like they obviously were like we're not ever going to finish this game if we just carry on how we are, so it kind of rushes the ending. But the first half where you are literally just a bunch of guys just like looking at shit and fighting stuff, it was actually like, you know what? If they didn't give this a terrible plot and gave it no plot at all, it would actually be quite good, in my opinion.
Yeah, for some games, I go in with low expectations in one area, but higher ones in others. And for fantasy games, I expect to deliver kind of on gameplay or atmosphere. And if it has a good story, that's a bonus. My standards tend to be pretty low for most fantasy games like that. So yeah, and I've seen from the screenshots they have like those big like rock arches going across.
Yeah, it's a beautiful game, absolutely. They just ran out of money, I think. Well, not money, but time, because the game had already been made for 10 years. And I won't spoil it, but there's a part where you get on a train, and a train is obviously quite a linear vehicle, and the game becomes a linear hallway simulator from that point.
Well,
So it's like you get on the train, you're like, oh, this is where they run out of time, and they're like, we've got to finish the game or we're all going to
I'm
get
I'm
shot.
almost alright with that if you're seeing just miles and miles of landscape while that's happening. So it's kind of
Oh no, you're
well,
not on. Like you get on a train and then you get off it. Like the cutscene is a train.
oh,
You
I
get
see.
off, and then the game just becomes like a linear
So it
story
goes
sequence.
from like open world to more kind of corridor. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I don't like that. Like, I mean, I'm fine with linear, but then you expect a certain quality level. So
yeah,
yeah, they should kind of do. If you're gonna do that, it should be the reverse.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's what
Like
it felt very weird. It's like
like
if you were playing Grand Theft Auto and then like you were immediately playing Wolfenstein or something. You'd be like, wait, what happened?
yeah, let the player get their bearings first and like kind of walk them through, then like fine, dump you into a big world. Well,
Someone's saying that sounds like Metro Exodus. I
well,
is Metro the kind of game where it's like, you've said you like the ones where it's not open world, but it's very open, where you kind of
yeah, I call
choose
it
your way
like
through.
pseudo linear. You know,
I'm
or
assuming Metro is like that.
you have like your objective, but you can kind of wander off some if you want to. You know.
Yeah, I love that. Like Dishonored, I'm a huge sim fan. So like stuff like Prey, like when it's too open world, like Just Cause and stuff like that, I find that utterly boring. But immersive sims, I love that because you feel like you're kind of you get to go where you want to, but they're small enough where they're actually able to fill it with things.
Yeah, the thing with open world, it's like I do and I don't like it because I it maybe some game designer has the answer for this, and I just because when I'm thinking with open world, I kind of want to see everything, you know, but
Yeah,
you know there might be a few objectives I'm going to, and then it's like, well, what did I miss? Should I go here? And then it almost turns into like for some of them, it's almost like you're mowing the lawn for like trying to go,
yeah,
okay, have I been down this alley? Okay, now go here, now go down this alley. Okay. And it's so, whereas if it's like a little bit linear where it's like your objective's here and you kind of wander, well, then it's kind of like feeding it to you in a more satisfying way. But I don't know, if I have excuses to kind of, I guess one way I don't mind is if it's kind of making me if it's almost a little bit maze like where it's going to take me a while to get my bearings as opposed to just like a bunch of like city streets or
yeah,
something, then I'm getting some repetition, but it's not like wearing down on me like, okay, this
yeah.
place I've seen this, okay, this place I've seen this like 20 times, you know.
I think one big problem with open world is that it's so open that you feel tiny, but in at least in an immersive sim, you feel like a human being. And like there's like layers. So take like Dishonored, it's like it's very obvious. If you want to stay on the floor, you're fighting. If you want to go up a bit, you're doing a bit of both. Or you can go to the like, the top of the buildings and you're completely like a ghost. But you still feel like you're in a village. It's like if you were out with friends and if you're doing an immersive sim, you might be like, oh, let's go over there. But if you're playing in an open world, if you were playing it with friends, like in real life, they'd be like going off into the mountains while you're going off, into like the city. And
Yeah,
it's not very streamlined.
I was thinking that might be one way to do it, which developers probably wouldn't be thrilled about doing it that way, is have some like have some repetition, but make it obvious that's where you're going. So you can almost have like zones. So you feel like if you've seen a little bit of the zone, you've kind of seen the whole thing. Like there's some obvious spectacle events, you know, or architecture, that sort of thing. And then you can kind of move on to the next thing. So that way you don't feel an obligation to see like every last little alley
Yeah.
because you know that might work. So, but it would be technically open world, but be sort of a trick if they did that.
One, I don't know if you might know this, but one of my favorite games is Alan Wake. I remember when I first played that, I was amazed by how it felt linear, but it felt like a real place. And then later I found out that the reason it felt like that is because they
Originally, it
actually,
was open.
yeah, it was an open world. And then they decided, you know what, this is actually more fun if we just put you on a path. And I was like, that is the best way to do it, in my opinion. Make a world, but tell like maybe go through it in a story fashion, and it because it feels like a real town. But there's times where you leave the town or you go back in. I
It's
thought that's
hard.
the best way to do it.
It's hard to say though. I mean, like for best way because sometimes in linear games you see a level or something and you love that area and you wish you could see a lot more of it.
Yeah,
Like I haven't gone through it yet, but I'm guessing when I eventually do play Cyberpunk, I'm probably going to want to see every inch of the
yeah,
world, or maybe not the desert, but of the
yeah. When
cities.
Cyberpunk was shown, there's a YouTuber I watch called Charlatan Wonder, and he was like, he does a lot of stuff on immersive sims, and I was excited for Cyberpunk 'cause I like immersive sims, and then he basically said, this isn't Deus Ex or Dishonored, this is Grand Theft Auto, and I was like, I'm not going to enjoy it. Like just from that, but considering Grand Theft Auto makes $1 billion a year, I don't think they really need us trying to fix it. So,
Yeah, well, let's try. Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say the ultimate counter argument to saying like linear is better than open world because who knows what the future holds would be
Mm,
something like Microsoft Flight Simulator, where it's just the whole Earth. So
yeah,
yeah, you're not going to run out of things to see, really, in that. And with that's one thing AAA titles can do if they really is they can throw a lot of resources at something. So
yeah.
who knows? Maybe it's like the problem with open world is there isn't just enough and densely packed thing. Fine, here's everything in a game, and I could see that sort of thing happening. But
I think for me personally, it's not that there's not enough to see. It's that there's not enough for me to be shown. Like you probably haven't played. Have you played Breath of the Wild? I'm assuming you haven't really had access
no,
to
I
it.
haven't.
So, no. I've completed the new one, and the game is like it's huge. There is literally you could play the game for probably a million hours and
Yeah, I've
not get
heard it's
bored.
enormous.
It's just and just like even the systems are so complicated and you can do so many things. But for me, I don't want to play. If I wanted to do that, I could play Minecraft for the rest of my life. But for me, I want the game to show me its themes and to show me its characters and its story. And the new Zelda is terrible at that. Absolutely atrocious at that. There was one moment where I thought, "Oh, this is actually quite interesting theme-wise," and the rest is just like, "You're in a playground." It's like, yeah, I stopped enjoying playgrounds when I was 5. So
Yeah, well, I don't know. For me, it's a little different. Like I want to. Yeah, I can't think of like a lot of playground games I like. I sort of like objectives because what happens is if it's kind of a playground environment, my brain starts waking up and thinking, well, instead of like building my house in the game or something, like maybe I should just like actually work on making something real, like or accomplishing one of my real world goals. Where if it's something like I need to survive and build my house so that it's not broken down in the night and then I lose because I'm trying to explore some cave which will lead to this plot. So that kind of keeps me going because I have these goals that I'm trying to like, see how deep this game goes and that sort of thing. But some people
yeah,
really do like the kind of,
that's a
sandbox
different kind of
style.
thing, isn't it? Where it's like
Yeah.
there's open world games with story, and they're not built for me. But I appreciate why people do like the survival ones because, as you said, like you're building your own goals, and usually staying alive is a pretty important goal in itself for like gaming and real life. So
Yeah, well, usually my goal with those is to just kind of explore the map. And then and I'll be the first to say those aren't the most satisfying games to play, but I can enjoy it, because I feel like I've gotten the experience more or less from it,
yeah,
you know. Okay, yeah, we should go for more of your questions. You had a bunch.
yeah, yeah. So probably I think for most people who are just who are in. Did you hear about the guy who? This is going back to one of your videos. The Russian kid who managed to hack at least. I don't know how much he's hacked of it, but Need for Speed World.
Oh no. Oh, yeah, okay, No, I hadn't heard of that, but I'm confused because a Need for Speed World emulator was functioning like years ago. So I'm not sure what happened. I guess you just got like all the source code or something, or
From what I think it was PC Gamer who did an article on it. So how those kind of games work is obviously because it's server based. It sends information there and sends it back, but it's usually encrypted. But from what I could tell, the information it was sending backwards and forwards wasn't encrypted, which usually means you can hack people. But he just was interested in getting all the data. So as far as where he got a lot, I don't know how much of the game is playable, but I think he did set something up. So so that might be something for your follow up, for sure.
oh yeah, I was actually gonna do when I did the follow up. I was actually gonna show myself playing it, but there
Yeah.
was a working server emulator before that, so I don't know what happened.
Maybe he's involved in that then.
Yeah,
But I
maybe.
only
And
read
I mean,
about it
like
like a
years
year ago.
ago. So
Mm,
yeah, it was like almost. It might have even been. It wasn't long after I made the episode on it, so I'm glad to have been proven wrong on that. But
yeah,
it's kind of the exception to the rule when that happens.
yeah.
It's
Well, what one thing it makes me worry is that certain people tend to see one article about an online game being saved, and they're like, the nerds have got it. the models will fix it, and then you're like, no, you don't get it. Like this is equal to like someone, you know, falling down a cavern and finding gold and being like, I'm rich. It's like it's not gonna happen to everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's plenty of dead MMOs
Yeah.
because of that. Uh, yeah, I mean, well, I tried to make it clear just how difficult that was in my games as a service video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was comparing it to, well, Enigma, to cracking the codes of the Germans in World War II, and then
Yeah.
I got a couple comments saying, no, it's actually more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because at least when with that, you know, like the government are putting their best people behind that. But obviously when it comes to games that are, you know, online as a service, they're you've got the fans and you might not have that genius fan who you need. For instance, I saw it and I added to the questions. They just announced that Payday 3 is going to
yeah.
be games as a service, and the fans, luckily it seems like the fans are actually pushing back a bit on
I
it.
know. I mentioned that on Twitter. They had a PC Game article on it where they were saying it's on death row now. I was thinking, wow, I think this is the first like game publication I've ever seen where they explain that, you know, online only means almost certainly means the game is going to die later at the launch of a game. I'm never even, or pre-launch, you know.
Well, the reason for that is because Payday fans are so, like, I don't want to say cult in a bad way, but you know, they adore the game. There's a really strong community behind it. So when things go wrong in Payday, they're like the first ones
Well,
knocking on the
good.
developer's door.
I'm glad they're giving them hell about that. They should,
You know,
you know. Yeah,
like if
yeah,
Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out and it's online only, who's gonna? It's just gonna be a bunch of kids going, I don't care.
well, who knows? I mean, you could still have a bunch of them buying it anyway, but at least there's some awareness going on. Yeah, like I think that happened with I think it was Modern Warfare 2, where there was less awareness that this leads to a kill game, but what they were aware of was that they killed private servers, which had its own kind of community behind it. Whereas the Modern Warfare, I think you could have like private hosted servers. And I think, I mean, I barely played it. I think that's the case for Payday 1 and 2, where you can have like an offline mode and host your own server and have mods, that sort of thing. So,
One thing about a lot of modern game journalism, I get so angry whenever I see a post and they're talking about like, oh, this game has been delisted, you can't download it anymore. It's like, I don't get why you're reporting on this. This, yeah, the game's being delisted, but you can get access to it. You can hack an Xbox and you can do like, you're not talking about the games where literally nothing can be done. But they seem to don't want to talk about that. They just want to talk about delisted games. It's very
my
odd.
guess is it's probably similar to other types of media where that opens doors that can be problematic for their publication,
Nonsense.
because then you kind of have to point out the problem with online only games in general. And that's a lot of companies doing that. And then you have to kind of point out that it's irresponsible the way it's being done. And so those game developers are like, well, why the hell should we give you a preview copy if you're just going to attack what we're doing? And then that cuts into the income is all I can figure, because it's they don't want to look at this issue because the games industry is riding so high on basically the ability to rob you of ownership right now at this point in time. So it's the game the publications are there's indirect conflict of interest there is what I think.
Yeah.
Whereas talking about it being delisted, that's that doesn't require some giant systemic change in order to do that. Like,
Yeah.
or yeah, like a lot of people. Another news recently they did a study showing that 87% of games are not commercially available. It's like for me, it's like, well, yeah, that's an inconvenience, but I would actually. I was trying to guess. I wonder what the real number of games that are unavailable are that you just get.
Yeah.
I would guess it's probably like 5% maybe or
Yeah.
something
They're
like
not
that.
counting they're not counting torrent sites, are they? They're talking about
No.
like, oh, you can't play it on the official Nintendo Switch online store, thus we're counting that as unplayable. It's like, Jungkook, I think it's very important to re-release games because a lot of young people might not even know how to use a torrent. So, they get shown that game. But to talk about that, like I always use Darkspore. Anytime I hear someone go, well, it's not that much of a problem. And I just say, go download Darkspore right now. I can download any SNES game I want, even the ones that were like, so we saved a bunch that were on the satellite, which was kind of the first games as a service, which there's a whole other rabbit hole. But like, no one can play Darkspore. Like, there's no argument to that, in my opinion. Absolutely no argument. Until you can play Darkspore, you can't say that. Well, we should be. It's like, no, don't focus on that. Focus on games that are dead, not ones that are like cling on to
Yeah,
life.
and well, I mean, it's okay for some to focus on, especially like the more people. I guess what it is like the people who are trying to do things, above board and like straight arrow. They're coming to like more and more rude awakenings. Is what's
Yeah.
happening. Yeah, and that's also a bit of a pet peeve of mine. It's not a big deal though. It came up again because apparently Yahtzee released a video like a day or two ago talking
Mm.
about how game ownership is being um, attacked or kind of taken back from you, and he was talking about the difference between physical and digital. Darkspore came out with physical copies.
Yeah. It
That's
drives me
meaningless
nuts.
now. That I
Yeah.
think I said in one of my videos. This is like a boomer mentality that like physical
Yeah.
keeps you, because at one time that was the distinction, but it's
Yeah.
just about, does the game require you to connect to the internet or not? That's the
There's perfect examples of like Cave Story. You can play that now on anything. Cave Story, you can play it on the Amiga, you can play it on your PS Vita, you can play it on your Dreamcast. It's been ported to everything. That game did not come out physically until a publisher put it out. A guy put it out on the internet. It was download only. No physical edition, and it's
there's
everywhere.
hundreds, maybe thousands of examples like that
Yeah,
where it's only digital, but it was never at
preserved.
risk.
Yeah,
If anything, I'd argue for the real long term, digital is the only way to go because
absolutely.
eventually the medium breaks down that you're storing it
Yeah,
on. I actually had this was probably an exception. I used to have a DVD copy of Saving Private Ryan, and there was disc rot in it. It eventually
yeah.
eroded from the inside. Most discs I have haven't done that, but that was one that it did. I guess it was a bad run. But whereas if it's digital, you can copy it unlimited times. That's as safe as anything can get for medium
Yeah.
storage.
It's like, I know I'm gonna get some flack for saying this, but like, if the Mona Lisa burns down, if that burns down, all of those have been photocopied multiple times. It might not be as good as seeing the original, but it has, in a way, been preserved. But if you record a game on YouTube, that, in my opinion, that's not the same as preserving something, like
Yeah, well,
preserving a
the
game.
Mona Lisa is probably an outlier example because I would be surprised if it hasn't been laser scanned so they know like the
Yeah,
exact height of the paint on there. And there's probably been extremely good forgeries of it, or uh, I'm forgetting the word for like a legitimate copy of something where
yeah. Well,
recreations of it, for some enthusiast who wants like their copy of the Mona Lisa, like in their,
well, they call it a commission copy,
yeah,
where
commission
a
copy.
rich person will buy an original piece, but they don't want to put it in their house. No one wants to buy a $2 million painting and put it in their house. So what they do, they buy it, they put it in a storage place which promises it won't burn down, and then you get it copied. And then someone will be like, come round to your house, to your mansion, and say, "Oh, that's very nice." It's like, yeah, that's my art. I bought that, and technically they do own it, but that's not the original. But it doesn't matter. Like, you're still getting the same experience. So in my
Yeah,
opinion, digital is the future. Unfortunately, I'm
yeah,
not. I
replica.
love
Thank you.
yeah,
Sorry to chat.
I love physical media. Like, I've got an original Dreamcast, but you know, it's just saying, when people go, "Oh, the best way to preserve games is to ensure that PlayStation are still releasing discs." I'm sorry, but some like Tony Hawk's 5. I don't know if you know the history of Tony Hawk's 5, but they released it on disc, but they were running out of time to release it before the Tony Hawk's license ran out. So they pressed the discs, and then the last months they built the game. So on the disc, it's just the tutorial.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so if you play the game with just the disc, they'll go and be like, "Oh, you can play the tutorial, but if you want to play the game, you need to download 20 gig."
That might have happened more than once. I think there was. Okay, that might be more extreme. I thought it was like one of the skate games did something like that for a long time. Where
Okay,
like
EA, so that one's part of it.
there was like an essential patch you needed, and then that got shut down, so all you had was
Yeah.
what got released. But yeah, well,
But yeah, it's definitely a boomer argument where it's like, well, I've got it on disc. So it's like,
yeah,
well,
but
how about,
that's not really the problem. That's just them
yeah,
not be their mind's in the right place, more or less. It's
yeah,
just the details are incorrect.
yeah,
But I brought it up because Yahtzee brought it up again, and this is like a day or two ago. It's like, man,
yeah.
it's gonna take a
And
while for
because
this one to die.
he's so huge, he's signal boosting that mentality. So a lot of people who love, and I like Yahtzee, so
Oh
they're
yeah.
gonna watch that and they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'll just make sure I buy the physical copy of Fallout 76 and then I'll play it forever. It's like,
Well, I did see a couple comments, but one was saying something like, that physical by physical argument only kind of works until about 2014 or so. They were
yeah.
saying, I'm not sure. It's probably like a
You know
checkerboard
what?
pattern as to
I
like
would like
what's
to
safe.
find out how many, because I'd say the Xbox 360, it had patches, but most of the games on that PS3 and Xbox 360, you could probably put most of those in and on disc and play them. They might be a bit buggy, but I think with the PS4, maybe the PS4's probably got like 98% are playable. But nowadays, some games you put in and it's literally just, it's a license. You're buying a license essentially.
Chat, what's the ratio, do you think, for like for modern console games? Like, if you buy them on disc, like what percentage are going to be playable? Like even a 1.0, but like, as in like the game's safe, like or,
Just Dance just got released on the Switch, and I didn't find out until recently that Just Dance on the Switch doesn't come with the cart. It just comes with a download code, which is just imagine buying that boxed and then you open it and it says download me.
yeah, well, no, that's happened. I think was it for there were a few games for PC that were like that. I think it was Metal Gear Solid 5. Might have been like that where you open it up and it's just like a Steam code or well, actually on console I think it's like the God of War sequel or one of the God of War games is going to be like that or yeah, so
Right.
they're getting a taste of what things have been like on the PC, so maybe that'll be enough to
Yeah. But you
push.
don't expect it with the Switch because the Switch, like from my understanding, the Switch is actually pretty good when it comes to that. Most of the time, their patches aren't that big. 99% of the time, from what I can tell, you can play a majority. I mean, when the new Zelda leaked, people were playing pretty much the entire game before the day one patch. So
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a handheld. It's intended to be taken places that may not
exactly,
have
yeah,
internet. It's
yeah, exactly.
uh. Okay, well, here we should go on to more of your questions. You had a
Yeah,
bunch.
sorry. Yeah, let me just have a look. Let's get off gaming. I think it'll be good. What is
Okay,
your
well,
opinion?
we'll see what the chat says, but sure.
Yeah, how do you feel about the recent Bloomhouse, kind of like horror movies?
Oh yeah, that made me. I realized I'm behind on a lot of them.
Do you enjoy them?
Well, it kind of depends. Like I saw a list and there's like 70 of them. So I've seen. Okay, well, let me make sure I'm not screwing up the video
No,
feed.
that's
Okay,
not
cool.
right.
Yeah, Bloomhouse. Yeah, I think out of the ones I have seen, yeah, it was. Oh, okay, boy, there's so many. Bloomhouse horror. Let's see. There was like
Did you
a
have you seen Insidious?
yeah. I've seen the original.
What
I
did
thought
you
that
think
one
of
was
that?
pretty good actually. I remember it being feeling kind of creepy. I think my favorite out of the ones I have seen would probably be Get Out. That one had a real kind of Twilight Zone
Get Out
episode where
wasn't Bloomhouse. Get Out. I think Get Out was
well, okay, I'm looking at an article that
before.
says all Bloomhouse horror movies ranked, and they have Get Out on there.
Oh, you know
So
what? Because I loved Get Out, and I loved Nope, his new one. I think that's an outlier though. I can't. I don't think you can really count his Jordan Peele's work as a Bloomhouse. In my opinion,
yeah,
Bloomhouse.
and this list had it way up there. They had The Invisible Man, like the new one, and I didn't think much of that one. That one was more they were going for like maximum drama out of it, and it wasn't that great in my opinion.
Did
And
you like Hollow Man?
Hollow Man was all right.
I love that film. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, Hollow Man's more like it's not going to change your life, but it's a fun movie. You don't feel like you've been robbed watching. It's trying to be entertaining.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's got
actually,
Kevin Bacon in it.
actually, I think my favorite would probably be Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which is it's
Which one's
going
that?
more for a comedy. That one's from like '80s, I think. John Carpenter directed it. That's Chevy
Oh,
Chase as the Invisible Man. That one's probably more impressive because they're having to use a lot more tricks with the special effects. They can't just CGI it all. So
well, that's what I said about gaming. I love when because the technology is lacking, not lacking, but it's a bit primitive. They have to try harder, and I think that makes it better in some cases, as opposed to when you could just do it all on a PC. The laziness kind of comes in where it's like, oh, I'll just click, turn him invisible. But back then they were like, oh, we have to think about how does you watch the making of Roger Rabbit, and you don't think this was lazy, do you? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, no, yeah, like I remember like when the cartoon splashed the water, like
Yeah, and that took
that.
like a month or something to do.
Okay, well, again, this one isn't recent, but this one probably be number two for me. The Bay from 2012. That one's I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it. It's kind of an eco thriller one, slash horror. It has kind of a documentary footage style to it, but it was pretty solid.
I think I should have looked into it because when I think of Bloomhouse, I think of like the modern ones like Megan, The Conjuring, The Nun. Have you seen The
I've
Nun?
seen The Conjuring. I haven't seen The Nun. I haven't seen Megan. Yeah, I remember The Conjuring just kind of being okay. I don't know. It wasn't.
For me, they just feel so cheap. They look really cheap. Like there's a part in The Conjuring 2 when I saw it. I only saw it once, and it's like a living room scene, and it felt. I've seen some episodes of Seinfeld which have more realistic cinematography, and it didn't feel like a real living room, and I couldn't believe it that this film was making like millions of dollars, and it was honestly like they forgot to turn the lights off or something, so it's really overly bright for like a British living room in the 1970s, which I don't know if you know much about British living rooms in the 1970s, but they were definitely not bright. It's very odd.
Yeah. So anyway, there's dozens and dozens. Like I a lot of yeah. I don't know. I've gotten pickier with horror movies. The horror movies I like are well ones that are just trying to scare the hell out of you, like, and are really doing a decent job at it. I also like horror adventure ones where it's kind of a bit of adventure, but it's very scary also. And then horror comedy. But I can be pretty picky on those. I've really kind of lost my taste for kind of the ones where they're just kind of wandering around half the movie, just kind of look like I find like most ghost movies kind of boring for me, and most slashers, but slashers can work. I feel like slashers can kind of work better if they are trying to be a little bit tongue in cheek with it, or I
Well,
guess mind
ironically,
bending ones to some degree, like if it's kind of like sci-fi horror where sci-fi in the sense that Get Out was kind of like that, where you're
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, this is weird. What's going on? Uh,
Leaves you questioning.
yeah, yeah. You're not sure where this is going.
Most horror films nowadays don't have any questions. They're like, oh, I get it. It's a demon.
Yeah, or well, it can even be the. Well, I remember, what was it? This might not have been Bloomhouse, but It Follows. That one had a creepiness to it. That it's kind
Oh
of
yeah.
like, I don't know. I can't always explain what one's doing that another one's not, but you can tell when some are just kind of like, okay, we're just phoning it in. This is a job. We're just gonna
Yeah.
go here, stay in our lines. Okay, it jumps out,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's
I
why
watched
in
Megan.
sorry, I keep cutting you off by accident. I was gonna say
No,
that's why
no.
Insidious. I felt like, well, from what I remember it feeling kind of creepy, like that, like, yeah, this is kind of drawing me in slowly, even if the plot is nothing that's like mind blowing or anything like that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean
Yeah,
to.
so I was gonna say I watched Megan, and I watched it with a friend, and throughout the film I was like lowering into my chair because I was just getting so like annoyed with the movie. And there's really early on the film, she goes like they created a robot, right? And it's the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created. It's a robot as well, and they created it for $100,000. And I was just like, no one read the script. No one read the script and said, by the way, I just don't know if you're aware, but you could make $100,000 by doing a crypto scam on Twitter. Like it costs a little bit more than $100,000 to make the most advanced AI robot ever made.
Well, I remember another example like that was in Prometheus, where they talk about how far away they are from Earth, and so they're supposed to be in like another planetary system, and like if you actually plug in the miles, they're somewhere around like Jupiter or Saturn, like for the number that they say. So
Yeah, no one read the script and put notes next to it.
yeah, Prometheus was weird because they were not worried about like the believability of it, but they stylistically, I thought they did a pretty strong job for that one. So it's like, okay, I'm still kind of engrossed in this, even though if we're just completely ignoring like some big plot holes or common sense stuff, or just the science for the science fiction part of
Yeah.
it. So I can roll with that, even if some people like you've lost them once they start getting too. Okay, so it looks like
Jargon.
all the Purge movies, or at least the Purge sequels, fall under Bloomhouse
Oh,
also.
do
And
it really?
yeah,
Oh, they
those
must
are all
be.
kind of like okay. I feel like they never kind of hit their potential for me. Um, there's also let's see, the Belko Experiment. I have seen that one. I remember I mean, it didn't blow my mind, but I remember liking that one all right. It was kind of a people going crazy movie. And
What was the last horror film you saw that you thought, oh my god, that was like actually a classic?
oh geez, I'd have to think about it. This wasn't on your question, so it's that's the problem. It's not that I'm like trying to evade the questions. It's just that
Oh no. Did you see Hereditary?
yeah, I did. Some people really like that one. I don't know.
I
It
lo-
just
One of my favorite films. I
okay. So I'm the minority then for
yeah.
Heredit. Okay, well, okay, it wasn't my favorite, but I thought it was pretty strong. Midsummer. That
Midsummer's
one,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely
That one, that 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 one's more like my personal taste thing. If somebody said like that's a horror classic for them, I could see why. That.
That's the same director by Hereditary, Ari Aster.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to think of
You
what
probably won't like his new one, I don't think.
was it. Bo is Afraid.
Yeah, it's
I skipped big
oh, it's
chunks of it. I really like
oh,
some
if you watched it,
scenes of it. What?
would you skipped through it? I mean, it is
I
3 hours
skipped
long.
big chunks of Bo is Afraid. Yeah, yeah. I think you have to be
I
in the
saw
right.
people leaving in the cinema when I was watching it.
Yeah, I can see what. Like I love the part at the beginning where he's doing the sprint to his apartment to try to beat out
Yeah,
and then the part where he's in his bathtub and then sees the guy up above. I
yeah.
was laughing at. at
When I
those
was watching
parts.
that, I was like, some people are gonna think this is over the top, but yeah, like I think it's some people did not grow up in inner cities like New York during like the 1970s, where it was sometimes like that kind of nightmare. Do you know what I mean?
There
Like you were
even
living in
even
taxi driver.
without that, there are neighborhoods where it's
Yeah,
if you're out after dark, it's
it's
geez,
like another
I
world.
shouldn't spoil things because I realize I'm giving away part of Next Freeman's mind. I talk a little bit about this. Uh,
I think that brings us on well to what do you think of mascot horror? If you know what mascot horror is.
is that the? I still haven't even watched it or played it. The Five Nights at Freddy's thing, or
Yeah, so it's horror that's based more around like the enemy characters and the lore as opposed to story and like it's not scaring the player. It's a very surface level scare. It's like boo, as opposed to building up dread and giving you a story where you're questioning things. There's not much to question.
I,
it's
I
it's
feel
very
like
lore driven.
I feel like jump scares are something that can enhance a movie if it's done right and you don't
Yeah,
do it too much, or that can kind of work well actually for horror comedy too, where I, it seems like a mascot horror would kind of lend itself to something like a horror comedy.
what happened is Choo Choo Charles was
What?
leaning to that. I mean, Choo Choo
I
Charles, the
haven't
one with
played
the
Choo Choo Charles, but I know of it. Okay, the original Purge was a Bloomhouse. I was wrong. Uh,
someone
yeah,
in chat said, "Is lore not synonymous with story?" And I would say not.
uh, yeah, because what the way to look at it is, say you don't know the lore and you're sitting down watching this movie. Does the movie give you a reason to care about the characters or the
Exactly. Yeah.
plot or something that's happening?
The best
So
way to explain it is if you are going out with someone or you're married to someone, but you don't know your girlfriend or boyfriend's sister's life story, are you still invested in your girlfriend or boyfriend? Like, that's what lore is. Lore is knowing, oh, I heard that your sister, she just went through an adventure. It's like that's lore is not story. Like it's something in the background that can enhance. But if you replace story with lore, I think you've lost everything.
yeah, like I think what was it? I think the Watchmen movie. They have a lot of like extra stuff in there where if you are really into the lore, like I've heard, like you'll see stuff in the background that you're like, oh, this connects to this part, and that's fine because for people like me who don't know all the references and we're just watching the movie, it's like,
Yeah,
well, okay, the plot was interesting, characters are interesting, so that can kind of work for that. Uh, yeah,
and my
okay.
question was mainly, why do you think children become obsessed with these games? Because it seems like children have an obsession with lore. They love media where you can dissect every single aspect of it. Like they don't like just taking something in subjectively. They love to dissect the objective fuck out of it, essentially. But I don't know why it's children who are obsessed with it. I don't know why it's specifically children who love that. Do you feel like that as a kid?
Of being attracted to mascots. I mean, you can be.
No, I just mean like the lore of things. So like, did you feel the need when you watched a movie you liked or played a game that you liked that you felt like you had to find out every single micro?
No, but what I wanted was more. If I liked a movie or a game a lot, and I guess lore is sort of a bit of a substitute for that, because what you really want is like a new episode or a new movie with
Yeah,
more of what the characters do. But if you don't have that, then you might get more. It might depend on your personality too. I mean, some people just want to know the little details of everything,
yeah,
and lore would probably appeal more to. I'm. I think for a few things I've been curious about the lore of if it's like extra mysterious, and I felt like the movie left me wanting to know more about it.
yeah.
But yeah. I'm trying
A
to.
good example is, most people watch Lord of the Rings and they come out of the cinema, like 95% will be like, oh, that was awesome. I feel like I got what I wanted from that. And then you got 5% who will go, oh my God, I need to read the Silmarillion. Is it the Silmarillion? Am
Yep,
I
yeah. I
pronouncing that
think
correctly?
that's it.
Yeah. Um, and that
Silmarillion.
5% will, yeah. But mascot horror is the other way around, where there'll be 5% of people who play it and go, I had a fun time. That was, but the other 95% are watching YouTube videos about it, watching essays, making the Wikipedia, reading the Wikipedia, finding out, like watching these videos where it's dissecting every single thing about it. And I just think for me personally, who, I grew up with things like Twin Peaks, David, like a lot of David Lynch films. And once I watched something, I watched it and then I had my subjective view on it, but that was it. But nowadays, like people hate that. They're like, oh, I can't just have a subjective view on it. I need to know exactly what happened. It's very odd to
It,
me personally.
it's hard to say how much of this is like a prevalent thing versus how much this could just be very vocal minority, that's into that.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking it's not mascot horror, but I think a horror movie involving a mascot has a lot of potential for comedy, because I remember thinking a movie's. I think it wasn't horror, but I think the movie was U.S. Marshals, where it starts off where you have like this guy in a mascot and he's holding a sign, it's like advertisement for some store or something, and then you see like somebody walk by and then you see him just like stand there frozen, and it just drops his sign, and then he starts following like the person he's looking at, and then you see him take out a gun like, and then eventually he takes off the head, and what you realize in the movie was that he was just an undercover officer, just they're
Yeah.
waiting to do a sting on some guy. But I was thinking, what if it wasn't? What if it's just like this guy in the mascot just snapped
Well,
because
yeah, lost
like,
it at
yeah,
that
he
one
thinks
moment.
like, or like, his wife's having an affair or something like that, and then he's like, and I think
Sees
you
the
could have
guy.
an over the top kind of slasher comedy that could work pretty well with
Yeah.
a
And that's
mascot.
what that's what Friday the 13th became in a way, isn't it? Or oh sorry, Nightmare on Elm Street's the perfect example of that, where in the first Nightmare on Elm Street it was about Freddy, and his effects on the characters, and then later on it became, well, it's just
it
about Freddy. No
it
one really
gets
cares about the
goofy,
characters.
but yeah, it gets goofier too. It's
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, I think mascots. I mean, I love it. I love real mascots. I love like sporting events where they just go over the top and they'll get in fights, or they'll like smash a cake in a guy's face. Or there was one clip I saw where this woman, the sports reporter, is doing, she's doing coverage of the game like in between the break or something, and like, and then you see as she's reporting, this mascot walks up like right next to her and just stands there like, and then she like looks, and then as soon as she realizes like this giant furry mascot is next to her, she freaks out, and like I think she punches him or something, and then the mascot runs off, and then she's just laughing because it was just the guy screwing around. So
Yeah. Well, that kind of bleeds into, we talked about Resident Evil 2. Like
yeah,
in the remake, one thing they wanted was to appeal to a younger audience. So by doing that, they kind of had their own like mascot horror, which was obviously in the original, Mr. X wasn't really that important, like at all. Like he was more of an extra for
yeah,
the
yeah. But I
second
kind of
scenario.
that's a good example because again my memories are hazy, but I like Mr. X because this kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. Like, and
Yeah,
then it's this
exactly. Yeah,
mysterious figure that keeps following you. It's like,
yeah,
whoa, this is. I kind of like that because this feels like almost something that just kind of
yeah.
just crashed into the main storyline. Like, whoa, what is
Well, the
this?
whole
What's
point
going on?
was it was to make the second
Yeah,
scenario like more interesting.
and it spiced
But
up the second story. Yeah.
you've already gone through the game and experienced it all. But how the remake does it is that he's there from the beginning. So
Oh,
instead of going into a room and being able to soak in the atmosphere like you would with the original, and then he would be added later. In this one, you're in a room and he's stomping outside of you, so you don't even get time to take in the atmosphere.
yeah. like I almost feel like something like that is fan service in a cheap way. Because then it's like, hey, look, we brought back Mr. X. See. Whereas
Yeah,
in the original, it's just like, whoa, what's going on? Like,
yeah,
and I like that impact of it. And in fact, I mean, I guess a few games have done this, but I really like that element in games where you're kind of like if you're doing another playthrough or you're repeating a lot, and then you're seeing some element that just wasn't there earlier. And if you do that right, it can almost be like you're kind of looking behind the curtain in like a surreal way that, like, oh, there's this other layer of reality that you weren't aware of.
yeah.
And so by playing what you thought was going to be a more mundane, like kind of rehash of what you already
Yeah.
did. No, instead you're seeing things that weren't there before, and then I like that if it's done right because that
Yeah.
can be really cool if it's
Well, that's what happened with Resident Evil 2. It was a surprise for when you were near, you played the game again. But in the new one, the surprise is being turned into a gimmick, and it just kind of ruins it. Where it's like, oh, I'm no longer surprised. Like, you actually, he's more of a villain in the remake than who's the guy, the scientist? Oh my god, I feel like I
the
should remember his name.
Tyrant
Yeah,
X or something. I don't.
he's barely in it. He's barely in the remake, and in the original, he was the one who, with the pathos, he was the one like the scientist, turning himself into a monster. That was the whole point of Resident Evil 2, and that's like removed.
Yeah, it's like because he is. You don't know what that. Yeah, that's just it. You're only seeing zombies and mutants prior to that, from what I remember. And when you see
Yeah,
Mr. X, it's maybe a mutant, and it's like in this trench coat and a fedora. It's just like, what's going on here? Like, and
and he's
but
sentient.
making that just this side thing that you weren't expecting, and that's just off to the side. That kind of increases the mysteriousness of it. Whereas if you're
Yeah,
shining a floodlight on it, well, then you lose all that impact. I would think. So
mhm,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, because I'm thinking the original Fallout games had, well, I guess in the newer ones too, they have a mysterious stranger where, if you get this perk in some fights, you can have this ally that comes up out of nowhere, and that's kind of a neat aspect because it makes you kind of wondering, well, what was that about? Whereas if you were to make them like a main character and give them a plot, well, then you lose the mystery of
An
it.
example of that is you probably have you played Final Fantasy VII the original?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, because I know
I've
you
seen
you're
some
in first.
I've seen some
So
gameplay of it. Yeah.
in Final Fantasy VII, there's a character called Vincent who you can actually miss completely. Like he's a side quest, but he became like a fan favorite because it's kind of cool. Like if you're obsessed with that game and you're like playing it, you're like, oh my god, how often do you have an extra character who you can miss? It feels special. But then they gave him his own game on the PS2, and it's like you took a character who wasn't actually important enough to be a main character, and you just gave him a game. It's so weird how that can happen.
Yeah, well, that's all right if you want it like a side. Occasionally, a side character ends up being better than the main character. I'm drawing a blank on an example, but well, I mean, it's the what I think for the Marvel movies, Deadpool was like the highest grossing R-rated movie, and he's meant to be sort of like a goofy side character, my understanding, in like the comics, but because he was so strong as like a comedic character that it ended up outdoing a lot of the bigger budget, more notable characters from the universe, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But I know there's gaming examples, but I'm drawing a blank on them. Uh, what? Well, I guess we can go to more of your questions unless you had another one
Well,
train of
I'm
thought.
interested to ask you, what do you think is going to happen when games enter the public domain?
Jeez, we'll be in the ground. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah. What's the public domain now?
They've extended it, haven't they?
It's like 70 years past the lifetime of the creator or something. Yeah. Like we're just now getting like Steamboat Willie. So not even like the modern Mickey Mouse, but like the black and white kind of stylized. What when the hell was that? Like, okay, yeah, Steamboat Willie.
Did you
That
watch
that's
the Winnie the Pooh horror movie?
okay. 1928. It looks like okay. So we're talking about like 105 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is not a problem we're gonna need to worry about. Like,
Well, I'm more worried about like because Steamboat Willie, even if you haven't seen it or got access to it, you can still use it as a property, and still use it as an idea.
recently, I think it's like the past year or two or something that happened. So now it's public domain. You can use that the way you would use like classical music or Jules Verne's or something. I'm assuming Jules Verne's has exited.
Well,
God,
the one thing about
Grim fairy tales. You know.
people always get kind of confused with classical music because yes, you could use classical
You
music,
can't
but
use the rendition by that particular
yeah,
orchestra
yeah,
if
yeah,
they
yeah,
can
yeah.
prove that. You know.
People always like, why did my YouTube video get striked? And it's like, well, you used the London Symphony Orchestra's
Yeah.
version of it. They technically own that, unfortunately. So,
Yeah, their rendition. Well, that's fair enough. I think, but
oh, so one positive thing about games preservation. So Capcom are releasing one of their games that was a mobile game. It was a Mega Man game. I saw someone mention Mega Man, so it made me forget. It was a Mega Man game, and it was like a gacha game where you collect stuff. You go through. There's a lot of girls in it. Like it's probably more girls than any Capcom game ever because they know that people prefer to collect girls in these games. But they just shut the game down, which most people I never even heard of it, and I didn't even hear anyone moan when it got shut down. So again, that's annoying. But they're releasing it on Steam with all of the stuff in it. So in my opinion, like that's the best case scenario there. The people who played it and spent all the money on it can play the game again, and it's not lost.
the
But
chat's
I think
saying
that's
Mega
the
Man
only
X
problem.
Dive is the
Yes, that's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mega Man X Dive. Yeah.
yeah yeah that's great. Unfortunately, I think that's the exception that proves to the rule, but that this
Yeah.
almost never happens. But
Ever.
yeah, fantastic. There was a case, well, by Mojang, the Scrolls. That was one that did something like that, where they retooled it and released it, so you could play it offline. But great. I would love to be proven wrong that this is going to become a new trend for companies that when they have to shut it down, they just retool it and then you have you have the copy that's not going to go anywhere that you can actually buy and play permanently. And
Yeah.
actually, no, I realized what you were saying. It's like, well, you know how people like to collect girls in the game. It's like, well, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, but that might be a different subculture that
Yeah. Yeah, so when I saw it, because I'd never heard of Mega Man X Dive, I was watching the trailer and I saw it and it was like it shows you all the characters and like 90% of them were girls. And obviously I'd never heard of this game. And I said to my friend, this is a gacha game, this is a mobile game. I could tell you before I've even heard of what the title is. And it was a mobile game because people just it's mostly men who play these kind of mobile games and they prefer to collect girls in them,
so
unfortunately.
do you unlock characters that are
Yeah,
girls?
but they had to make up a bunch of new female characters that you could get.
Okay, yeah, because when you say collect girls, I'm thinking, well, is this you making a harem or like
Yeah, well,
is
that
this
unfortunately that's kind of the culture
so
that
sort of
these
yes
mobile
and
games.
no is the
Yeah,
answer? Like as much as they could push it without getting into like an adult really
yeah, yeah, yeah.
rated territory.
It really is like
Okay.
that.
Uh,
Like Mega Man, the originals were very male focused in regards to characters. It was mostly a shonen style, if you know what shonen means.
I
It's
don't.
it's
You're
like
probably knowing more specifics
shonen
of this
is
than
like it's like Dragon Ball Z, kind of. It's manga made for boys, like school age boys who it's mostly men fighting men using power levels and that kind of thing. So like Mega Man X is mostly a male story, but Mega Man X Dive is like it's probably the most females they've ever put into the Mega Man series, and it's because it was a mobile game.
okay. Well, again, it's not my thing, but I'm fine with that's what people want, you
Well, they're
know.
saving it, so at least they're saving it. I probably will never play it, but I'm just happy that Capcom decided, you know what, we're just gonna re-release it because they put effort into it. They put man hours into it. That's what's the saddest thing when, people spend hours on these games and then they get shut down. It's like,
And hey,
you can't
somebody
tell your
out there
children.
probably cares a lot about it, you know.
Yeah.
So
Imagine your children are like, oh, so you made games, Dad, and it's like, yeah, I can't show you any of them because they're all dead.
yeah, it's well, well, I'm
So here's
actually
another question.
what?
Another question I'm interested is, did you hear about Shadow Warrior 3?
No. Well, I mean, I know I played the first one. I played the first remake of or reboot, I guess would be a better term
Oh,
for it. So
you know what you're talking about with what's that racing game? It's got a really generic title.
Trackmania, the
Yes,
crew.
Trackmania.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the Trackmania, you know how later on it got worse. Well, I can't remember what video I was watching, but apparently Shadow Warrior 3, they released a definitive edition on newer consoles, but because they increased the graphics, the game went from 60 FPS to 30, which to me is just unacceptable, like from any re-release, in my opinion.
Yeah, you need like an option for that. Like, what would you prefer? Like, I think they do that for some console games,
Yeah,
where you can choose either the higher fidelity or the higher frame rate. You know,
yeah.
I think it was like
But
Xbox
just the
Series
idea that
X. Or,
they're releasing games that like was originally 60 FPS and then they're releasing it at 30.
yeah,
That
that
is
would be a
just
slap in the. Your
bizarre.
textures aren't that good, you know, like to go down from 60 to 30. I mean,
So
I
my
think.
question is, when do you notice the FPS?
Oh well, it's a little different now. Well, right now my monitor does 60 frames a second. So if I go less than 60, I'm either gonna have some stuttering or frame tearing unless I go down to 30. And for 30, I don't like it unless it's like a really slower paced game. Yeah, it's people are gonna think it's hypocritical since I usually release my videos at 30. I don't mind watching stuff at 30, but if I'm actually playing, I like to have like the 60 frames a second. Back when I had a CRT, I remember and like was playing like Quake and stuff. I remember around the mid 40s is where if I got to that level, I'd be okay with it. And
Yeah.
but if I went below that, it's just like yeah, this is feeling kind of low. So
I remember
for,
as a child not noticing it at all.
yeah, but even then, I probably had frame tearing, but was just used to it. But for frame tearing, I'm glad to get away from that. So if I don't want frame
Yes.
tearing, I gotta
Anytime I see footage of an old PS3 game, screen tearing is the
yeah
first thing
screen
that makes me
tearing.
feel I hate it. I can't believe like we went from PS2 to PS3 and the amount of screen tearing that HD, like 1080i and then 1080p introduced. Like you look back at it now and I think, God, this is like one of the reasons that like releases from PS3 to PC are so important because some of them just look terrible with the screen tearing.
And the chat's saying when you game at 5 frames a second on a laptop for long enough, anything higher is beautiful. Well, it sounds like you should be playing like card games then on the stuff where or just these 4x strategy games where it doesn't matter that much if
Yeah.
it's like if your speed's chugging like hell. But yeah, so right now for me it's kind of 60 or nothing for most games unless it's like uh, well some games are still capped at 30, some older ones. So in which case I don't have a choice on those, but I mean I'm not sure where my cutoff point is for where I don't see the difference. It's probably decently high. I mean, higher is nice, but for the monitor I got, it basically doesn't with the other specs it has, it doesn't exist at a higher refresh rate. Or no, there was one it did, but then there were a lot of reviews saying, "Oh, it went bad after a year or it went bad after 6 months." I'm thinking, nope. I'd rather. I'm okay with 60. You know, higher is nice, but it doesn't kill me. But I'm not doing lots of competitive gaming either. So if You know, where that's literally an advantage to have it at the higher refresh rate. Plus, there's a hell of a lot of games that are capped at 60 too. You know, for I don't want to get too spoiled,
Yeah,
but
but for me, it's I've got a Steam Deck, and one thing it allows you to do is it allows you to lower the refresh rate of the screen to 40. So I know, like for me, 40, if it's a game that struggles to hit 60, 40 is basically, I can't really notice the difference between 40 and 60, but I can notice the difference between 40 and 30. Definitely.
oh, I can see the difference between like 60 and 90. I guess I
Really?
haven't been a. Oh yeah, like I guess I haven't been around. Well, I say this. I used to have a CRT that went way high because for those old shutter glasses to make games in actual
Yeah.
3D, you needed that refresh rate. But the thing is, you have blank frames inserted, so it wasn't like a true test of like what the frame rate is. But I mean, yeah, I would like a monitor with higher refresh rate, but I moved to the just this giant kind of over the top ultra wide that I'm probably going to be on for many years. And for my taste, I having a big screen in ultra wide is nicer for me than like having the higher refresh rate. But it depends on the gaming you do. Like if you're doing lots of multiplayer stuff, I can see where no, the refresh rate would be better. But if I'm playing some game with some big landscape or almost any driving game, I like having the ultra wide. It's nice. Yeah, I think my dream monitor doesn't exist yet, but it got kind of close. It's getting closer. Samsung announced what a 57-inch one that's basically it's like what I have but even wider, except it has a VA panel instead of an IPS, and I would want the IPS, and that one supports either G-Sync or FreeSync and stuff. So,
Is it beyond your peripheral vision?
um, well, my current one, no, but it covers a healthy chunk of it.
I feel
The
like if it was so large it went past my peripheral vision, I feel like that would freak me out.
Yeah, it
I
might.
like being able
There
to
were
see, I
there
like being
was
able to see it all in one
for a
eyesight.
week or two, I was wondering if I made a mistake when I
Yeah.
bought it because it kind of just was like too much. But then for some games, like I would just be like, oh, this is amazing for like seeing something. So okay, somebody's saying 40 to 50 feels. They went up to 140 hertz monitor, so 40 to 50 feels the way we're talking about 30. Yeah, I could see that, but it, weird stuff can happen too because I swear to God, on some games, 60 frames a second feels way smoother than 60 frames a second on another game, even though they're both doing 60. And I don't know what. I guess it's like the frame pacing, or I don't know what it is.
It's also motion blur. A lot of games use
See,
motion blur
I
in a
mean
weird
games
way.
that don't use motion blur. Yeah, obviously
Okay.
motion blur can give that feel and kind of give you a little more smoothness feeling for your buck, but I don't know. It's probably very technical. Oh, there was an article on that. Oh, here, I'll make a note. I think PC Gamer did where they talked about like how smooth I think it was something like Hi-Fi Rush or something where they did
Hmm.
something with the frame rate where they put a lot of detail into how the engine handled the frames. I'll link to the article I'm thinking of and when I put this on YouTube. Yeah. So we're still ironing out like fundamental issues in games in the modern era, though it's better, I guess, overall. Yeah.
Someone
So
brought up in the chat, what do you guys think of Turtle WoW? A private server with mods that adds new quests, raids, and races to WoW. Firstly, I think, is that going to get shut down? Because Blizzard, I know they're very heavy-handed when it comes to private servers.
depends where the server's hosted. I mean, if it's in a
Yeah.
jurisdiction that they can't get at, then no. You know? No, I mean, I think that's look. I can't think of many games that don't benefit from modding, and some games benefit much more than others. And MMO, absolutely, that's going to benefit from mods. I mean, Uh, the kind that probably benefit the least are ones that are like really linear and narrative heavy, where you're kind of it's basically telling a story and you're participating. Whereas the more
So
kind of
this was
open
actually
and
one of the questions. Have you played any of these modern? Because a lot of modern MMOs now don't want to be like, wow, I don't know what is it, like turn-based, but like cool, as you call it, cooldown combat.
yeah,
A lot of them now are just like hack and slashes and stuff like that. Like there's one called, if you heard of Black Desert
yeah.
Online.
I played a little bit of Black Desert. A few things need to align for me. It's not just the gameplay; it's also like the theme. And my impression of Black Desert was they were not lying. It's a lot of desert or arid areas, and my bias against that is real. Like the if it's not 100%. If I feel like the desert's like they really creating a cool mood, or that it's very mysterious, then I can be on board. Actually, I forget the title. It was one of the. It was like the Homeworld spin-off one that was like the RTS on the ground. It's like
Ooh,
shipbreakers
yeah, that
mainly, or
looks. I I know you really love like RTS. For me, my brain just does not work in that way. But that one, where I saw it, I was like, God, that looks so much like Dune, and it
yeah,
looked
yeah. Like that
awesome.
one's
I really
really
wanted.
atmospheric. That one,
It
the
looked
game
awesome,
itself was kind of so-so, but
and I
like
loved the the guy who did the designs for Alien. I can't remember what his name is. Oh
H.R.
God.
Geiger.
No, no, no. He did the ship and he did the Blade Runner stuff as well. He
Oh,
died
okay. The
recently.
chat might know. Deserts of
Yeah,
Karak. That's what I'm thinking of.
yeah, that's it. So the guy who did that, the ship, like the trucks and stuff like that, I really wanted to play it, but I just can't. I mean, I played StarCraft 2 and I couldn't get into that, and I know that's like one of the easiest like
If
ever.
StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, I was gonna say if you've never played a real-time strategy game and you want to start off, that's what I would start off with. So yeah, you're probably a lost cause if you're not
Yeah,
on
I just
board
couldn't
for
get.
the and the thing is I can actually understand that because it is I'm lucky that my brain works with it, but it's not as immersive having like a top down looking at what's going on as it is like being like on the ground level, where you can kind of see everything. And uh, chat
Sid
saying
Mead.
Sid Mead or
Yeah,
Side Mead or
yeah, he's the guy who he did like a lot of the Blade Runner cars and stuff like that, and he uses a lot of like bold colors with like like warning things on. So when I saw the one, like I looked at Homeworld and that looked like end game for me. I was like, how do people even understand what's going on?
I'm
It's
gonna I'm gonna give Homeworld an honest shot eventually. Like, yeah, I think I mentioned in one of my videos that it's kind of like the Mount Everest of real-time strategy games. Like, for either that or Homeworld 2, one of them. Like, see, for me, what I have to get over is I get my brain processes stuff on the ground pretty well. But once
yeah,
you're getting into true 3D space in Homeworld, and then it's just like, okay, well, it's like, where the hell did I put that battalion or something, And like, and after, like, oh, wait, is the enemy coming at me from which direction? And it's easy to lose your bearings in space, So
yeah. Let alone multiple people in space.
yeah, so but I'm gonna give it a shot at some point. I like the atmosphere of it, so
So yeah, like Dune is a good desert, but
yeah, yeah,
fantasy, like sci-fi deserts are cool. But
yeah.
I'm assuming you just seem to struggle with fantasy
Usually.
deserts.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I think one of the differences, I mean, maybe is I like it if it feels like you were just in the middle of the Sahara or the Gobi or something, where no, it is nothing but sand and heat and whatever else, everything else is just man-made or some anomaly or something. Whereas if it's just kind of like wasteland, or scrubland, and it's just like, man, it's not impossible for me to like that if there's some other context, but I don't know. But yeah, back to your question about the MMO stuff. Um, I haven't run into ones where everything all kind of aligned for me, where I'm interested in the theme and the gameplay looks good. Like I gave when they had a free weekend or something, I gave Elder Scrolls Online a shot, but it just wasn't really grabbing me. Probably the one I did play through the Secret World like all the way, but that's more that I like everything except the combat, you know. So, uh, what's another one? Well, the one I'm most interested in, and I've heard it's not the best, is probably New World. Just because I'm on board for that theme. Like we're mixing fantasy with kind of
I think
European colonialism
if it's the
and
one I'm thinking of, that's what made me want to ask the question. Let me have a quick look.
well,
Um,
if you want to, the other
New
game that fits that niche that I'm gonna definitely play at some point is Greedfall, and that's not an MMO. That's just kind of like I think it's sort of a third person action adventure kind of game, or maybe RPG ish. I'm not sure, but it has that other theme where we're mixing, you know, European colonialism with fantasy,
yeah.
and like I like that. As a,
I guess here's a question. It wasn't on the original, but how have you dealt with games that kind of have an MMO feel, but they're single player? So, like, have you played? Oh, what's the one by Capcom? Oh my God,
Monster
Dragon's
World.
Dogma. No,
What?
Dragon's Dogma.
Oh, Dragons. I haven't played that. I think that's
I
one
think
where
you
the
would love
art
that
direction just sort of put me off. Like the environments, it's just here. Let me pull up some screenshots.
because
There's too
that's the
much
one that
brown. Let's
it
see.
is very. It was on the Xbox 360. What do you expect?
Yeah, but
um,
it's
it's like Dungeon Siege. Like you hire people and you feel like you get this motley crew of just like people following you and just bashing stuff, and it's all real time combat, and you can like jump on stuff. It's
I think
I think
yeah,
you would love it
I think it was like the environment sort of put me off from that, but maybe I should give it another shot because I don't know. It's like I can't unless the gameplay is just incredible. Like I love it. If it's just like all right, I kind of really want to like the atmosphere of the world I'm in. And this one, yeah, it felt like a little barren, kind of. I don't know, but in a way that just didn't. It wasn't that pleasing to me visually. I don't know. There's probably a word for what I'm looking for, but
I know you're not going to want to play it, but I
because okay,
really
like
wish you would.
I want to say Highlands, but the thing is,
Islands.
uh, Death Stranding had a lot of Highlands, but I kind of like the look of it much better. So maybe it has to just even do with the coloring or the lighting or something. I don't know.
That looks like Iceland, doesn't it? So, and Iceland is beautiful to look at. It's a lot of green. There's gray,
Yeah,
but there's green and gray, and green and gray are pleasing colors. When it's just gray, like a lot of NES games, I struggle to go back with because some of them didn't know how to use color and they're just gray, and I'm just
their
like,
palette
oh,
was the NES had a rough time with its palette, whereas Super
yeah.
Nintendo was just dream come true for what they were able to do with color with that one.
So one game, I bet you would love it, but I just know you're gonna have an aversion to it, and that's Final Fantasy 12.
Okay, well
It's
I
the
might
one.
watch a playthrough then.
It's single player, but the way it plays, it's like an MMO, but like so it's turn based, but you control loads of characters and they're fighting automatically. So it's
Oh
it's
well, that
like
might
dungeon.
work then. Like
It's like Dungeon
if
Siege.
see my brain would kind of switch over from like action more like into RTS mode where I kind of don't care how fast one unit is firing. It's just whereas combined they're all just like boop, 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 boop.
Yeah.
It's like all right, good. Our offensive is moving. So yeah, that might work
One
actually.
What's good about it is it's got this really great system, which I wish another game would rip off. And basically, because you're controlling multiple people at the same time, obviously, if you've got a healer, you don't want to have to keep saying to your healer, heal all the time because they'll run out of MP.
Yeah, put them on
What
automatic. Yeah, like
So what you can do, you can set parameters and you unlock parameters. The
oh
Gambit system, that's it. Yeah. So it'll be like it's called the Gambit system, and it was so cool. And I don't get why another game don't rip it off. Where it'd be like you were as you level up, you learn new ones. So your character can be like, if someone's HP falls below 50%, you can unlock a thing where they'll automatically heal them, and then you'll get ones where it's like, oh, if it's a fire enemy, use ice. So as you level up, you're not just getting stronger in stats, you're getting stronger in like intelligence, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
in common sense. It's
I'm
like they
cool
learn
with
common
that.
sense.
I'm cool with that too. If a game is gonna make me slog at first, but it's been communicated to me either by other players or something that no, it gets a lot better once you unlock this and this, and then it's like a new game. I'm all right with that. Like I'll, I can eat my vegetables before the dessert if the payoff's worth it.
And the new
Uh,
one, you can change the speed. So you could just, if you get bored, you just change it and they're like, and everything just dies in like a few seconds.
the tricky thing with that is you gotta. I probably might not have the option for a Final Fantasy game. Some games that are designed that you're meant to do things slowly and tactically and let you speed it up. Well, then I need to go to like easy mode because then the difficulty isn't meant for that kind of speed. But okay, maybe I'll give 12 a shot then. I didn't know
And it has a really good desert.
if
It has
it's
one of the best
because
deserts.
I played through Chrono Trigger and it still was a little more turn-based than I like, but Chrono Trigger was like blurring it a little bit because you could kind of queue up like the attacks and everything. So
Well, let's be honest. Chrono Trigger is like art wise and story wise is so interesting.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you don't often get a game where it's an RPG with time travel and that the enemy, the end boss is such an ambiguous thing.
Chrono Trigger has everything going for it. I mean,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
for
yeah.
I mean, I mean, I went in not knowing all this stuff about the end boss, but I'm just like, yeah, okay, this is. It has the nice Super Nintendo art style, and
The music is incredible.
yeah, music's great, and like the story. Yeah, well, I guess you have like this big evil, and then you're going to the future. So it's like, all right, we have a lot trying to draw us in here, So
Yeah. So that's actually one of the questions. So at what point did you switch to PC? Because you grew up on the Commodore 64, so you're already kind of used to like that's like a
jank.
PC that you plugged.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it was PC that you plugged into a TV. Then you got like the Amiga. So what console did you stop with? Which you've
I
never really
didn't have
mentioned.
an Amiga actually. Oh, I mean, I'm interested in Amiga, catching up on it. I never had an Amiga. So sorry, what was your question?
I think well, the Amiga only had one button, so I think you would dislike it quite a bit. But I love
Amiga
the
or
Amiga.
Atari?
No, the Amiga. So the Amiga is the one with the keyboard.
Yeah.
But most games were built with one button
Oh,
controllers in
okay.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of them were like you press up to jump, which I know is just I
Well,
hate
I
that.
went. If I didn't miss your question, okay. I mean, I was just kind of using what I got from my
Yeah.
dad for a while. I didn't have my own PC until like high school, but
But you had a Super Nintendo.
I did not. I had to catch up
Oh,
later. I would visit friends who had a Super Nintendo, and
oh,
also at department stores. Sometimes they would have them on display. Like Brendel's, I remember was the best one for that. And my parents would have to go shopping, and whenever I knew they were going to that store, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd like to come," like because they would go and like do shopping for 20 minutes, and then I could play Donkey Kong Country or Super Metroid or something, and like so. Uh,
so did you? Because from the videos you've made Super Metroid, like you kind of have that as like one of your scales, if that makes sense. Like I feel like everyone has this scale where they're like, oh well, is the game as good as this? Like if it's not as good as this, then I'm not gonna play it. Like you
no,
kind of compare a lot of games to Super
I'll
Metroid, like
play.
in terms of atmosphere.
I think Super Metroid is a great game. If a game is not as good as Super Metroid but still fun, I'll play it. That's I haven't thought of it about that way before. Of like, what's a game that meets like my acceptable standards, but if it goes below, because I
Yeah.
probably do have games like that, but I never really thought about that.
But like on the videos, like you compare a lot to Super Metroid. So I
Yeah.
got this impression that like you played it as a kid and it
Oh,
really had an effect on you.
I,
But
I didn't play it fully until high school on an
okay.
emulator, but I would
Uh,
visit friends and I would play it in stores, and what I saw was awesome. you know,
do you think that made it more mysterious that you didn't have it, and like so you only saw glimpses of it?
Maybe a little bit, but that game's so mysterious. Like even
Yeah.
now, I mean, you with the music and the lighting and everything.
Yeah.
Because I mean, once you get when you land on the planet, it's just like all you hear is like, like just this real moody atmosphere, and that and then you get deeper and deeper into the alien world, and it gets more alien with the music and the environment. So
Mm.
that's just it's a mysterious game. I
But
mean,
did you play N64?
yeah, a little bit. I played all of Ocarina of Time. I played that
How
through.
did you feel about the FPS on that?
Uh, well, actually, I did that one on an emulator also, so I can't remember if I might have done that at 60 because the emulator was able to
Well,
kind
it
of.
depends. When though, because Zelda is kind of it's actually locked. I think it's locked to 20 FPS. So all the animations are 20 FPS. So we
But is like the
they
actual
recently
movement and camera stuff locked to that though?
everything's locked to that. So
Okay,
what's happened?
Chad, maybe the chat can answer this. Did Ultra HLE, that was the breakthrough emulator, were you
It
able to
made it
run
smoother.
Zelda at 60? You know, I'm pretty sure I'm not sure now.
So what's happened? They did a reverse engineering of it, and they released a PC port, and the PC port allows you to do 60. The game looks a bit weird because it wasn't meant to run at 60. So some of the animations you look like you're running in slow motion and stuff like that. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's pretty much locked at 20.
Well, man, I'd have
So
to.
obviously you didn't notice. You probably loved the games. You probably enjoyed the
Well,
atmosphere
not only
enough.
that, I probably played. Maybe not the first. I bet I was in like probably the top 100 people who ever played that game in actual 3D, because I was running that
Oh,
on an emulator, and then I had the shutter glasses, you know, to render in true stereoscopic, so that when Link is on the plains, I see the sun off in the distance, the dust clouds from like, you know, riding a horse or something. Those come up in my face. So I was probably one of the few people who ever one of the first people who got to experience something like that. Just
did you play a lot in with shutter glasses then?
a fair chunk from the early 2000s. Like that was because some games there were good fits for, others they weren't. But like when it clicked, it was like one of the most amazing experiences. And I'm glad I finally made it back to some extent with VR. So
Well, that brings me on to one of the questions, which was you mentioned a tweet about the new seventh guest.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if you're aware. I don't know if this was tying into it, but one of the technologies I'm really quite excited for, especially when it comes to VR, is there's cameras. Do you know how like cameras work? How they've got a sensor, so the sensor captures everything in essentially 2D, but it uses a lens, which is essentially how your eyes work, where it will focus onto something. But they've created a camera that it'll use a 2D lens, and because it's scanning everything, it can get it all in a certain definition, and then it'll judge the distance of where it is. So imagine you are watching a film, and the action's going on. You can choose to look at certain things. So if you pick something up, you can focus on it with your own eyes. And I think that's what they're going to do with the new seventh guest, or have I
Oh,
got that completely wrong?
I hadn't heard of that aspect. The technical claim to fame that I heard about is they're going to have volumetric video, where what that means is, you know, it's basically going to be video that exists in 3D space. Like I think the best analogy I can make to it was like, you know, in the Matrix, the way they did those slow motion shots where they do like a 360
Yeah,
view. The way they did that was they had like a million cameras or 100 cameras or something, and it all captured that like when they were doing those scenes, they captured that all at once, and then they used software to kind
yeah,
of merge in between them. Well, I don't think they probably have stuff that's easier now, but it's essentially recording all the actors like that,
yeah.
so that they're
That's
going
exactly
to
what I'm talking about.
exist as video in 3D space,
Yeah,
and so that's gonna work. But it's very fitting to have that on the seventh guest because it was one of the first to have full motion video in a game, but it was a little off, but they had them as like ghostly apparitions, so it kind of worked well for that.
yeah,
So if this is a little bit off, they're still gonna be the ghosts.
yeah. So
So
that's
that
exactly what I'm talking about. Where it's like it films everything. As you said, with multiple cameras. So in the future, we're gonna have films where you'll feel like you're in the film, because if you look at an object, usually if the object is out of focus in the movie, it's out of focus to you.
Yeah.
But obviously with the seventh guest, you'll look at something, and if you're looking at it and focusing on it, the game will hopefully recognize that you're focusing on
Well,
it and put it into focus.
maybe that might take more work. I mean, what's easier is to, yeah, because I think that takes like eye tracking
Yeah.
and I think not all VR headsets have that sort of thing. But uh, what's easier is just have kind of everything in focus and just let your eyes, kind of like reality, where
Yeah.
your eyes do the out of focus and
Yeah.
thing. Whereas the depth of field effect in movies is to have it. That's to visually bring your attention to one area. Whereas in 3D, you kind of, I mean, you can make things out of focus with a depth. I guess if you really wanted to, like, you could make it out of focus, like in the background, if you wanted using like kind of a depth of field effect filter in 3D space. But it might get weird. But it's easier just. It'll be more like a play, where
Yeah. Because one
everybody's in
thing,
reality, so you see it.
have you played Alien Isolation?
No, I haven't. That's one I've been Stealth games tend to be. That's both. I've heard everybody says it's good, but that's both a stealth game and a movie-based game. So I am quite interested in like the Aliens movie setting. However, it sounds like it's just gonna be like kind of like a rehash of Alien, just in a different way,
Well,
or
the idea of playing
does
her
it go
daughter.
weird places with the plot? I don't know.
No, the plot is very, it does nothing. But the atmosphere is freaking fantastic. And one thing it did that I don't think any game, I mean, some games since then might have done it, but one thing that blew my mind when I was playing it for the first time, and I don't really see anyone talk about it, is in the game you get a motion tracker, right? And you hold that in your left hand, and so in games, obviously, when like you pull your gun up and it like focuses on the actual sights. So you
Yeah,
get two layers of focus. It'll make so it looks like you're actually aiming down a gun. What this did was you hold up an item and you can switch your eyesight. So it forces you to, like, when you look at an object, if you're looking at an object, background is blurred.
yeah.
Alien Isolation, as far as I'm aware, is the only game that does that. So every time you look at the tracker, the motion tracker, the background is blurred, and you have to swap your eyesight in the game. Like, you use the analog sticks to do it. I thought that was brilliant. It felt so immersive to have eyesight in a game, and I'm
Yeah,
excited for that for the
I'm
future.
pretty sure. I'm not sure what the first game to do the. I think there have been ones that probably didn't use it to that extent, because the earliest places I remember seeing it were like if you have like a sniper rifle and you're like looking down a scope or something like
Yeah,
that, or
we've
using
had it for guns for
binoculars.
years.
But yeah, this sounds like it's a gameplay element. Yeah, that might be a good game for me to. I I bet Vorpex supports it. Maybe I could run that in VR in the 3D theater mode. I bet
Yeah,
it'd be pretty scary then.
just play it on easy. Like, I played it on easy because I don't like these games where it's, for me, like, you can have a room and it can be empty and have no danger in it. And if you set up the atmosphere right, I will still be scared. But when there's someone stomping around, like bothering me, distracting me, that kills the mood. It doesn't add to it.
Oh, well, the thing is with hard difficulty for horror games, if you keep dying over and over in the same spot, then it becomes less scary. Whereas
Yeah,
what you
exactly.
want is to feel like you almost made it, like
Yeah,
that's like you just barely got away,
yeah.
and and
Or you
also well that
scary to be like, oh, was there anything to be scared of to begin with?
what also whenever I play games in what I call the 3D theater mode in VR, I always lower the difficulty to like the easy or something, just because it's a bit over. I have, in order to enjoy it more, I have to go slower when it's like that immersive, because
Yeah,
and the games usually aren't balanced or something like that. So I'll you go easy or cheats when I do that, just because it's not that I can't play at a higher difficulty, but then I have to focus a lot harder in a way that's not comfortable. It'd be like trying to, it wouldn't make you as immediately car sick, but it's like trying to read while you're in a car and it's going around curves. It's like you can
Yeah.
keep it up for for a little bit, but that's not pleasant, you know. It's
Well, you mentioned it in Deus Ex where you're trying to read something and you've got a timer in the
yeah,
background.
yeah. That's one thing that
I
like
hate that.
that was not. It's worth. Yeah, that's worth getting rid of. You know, that's
I hate to bring up Resident Evil 2 Remake again, but there's a part in Resident Evil 2 Remake where you go into the library and you're trying to solve the puzzle with the books, but he's chasing you, and I'm just like
oh.
I was just like, oh my god, leave me alone so I can concentrate on this puzzle.
I think yeah, I don't think any of them did that. I mean, there was the room in the original where you're going to crush Jill, but that's like a pretty simple puzzle. I think like
Yeah.
you just like
Also, they save you automatically in on easy mode, which is Jill mode. Only in Chris can you actually die, or if you do it kind of wrong, you can die as Jill. But usually Barry saves you.
well,
So
okay, I remember in the original they were. That's actually something I'm all right with them easing off. You had finite saves from your ink ribbons, and you had to choose when to use them, but you didn't necessarily know when you should use them. So I'm all right with them. Like put it like this: I'm all right if a horror game or scary game wants to like limit when I can save because it ups the suspense, and they've kind of balanced it around that. But the thing is, I don't know when that is. Like the developer needs to tell me when it's okay to save, not okay. Here's 5 saves. Take your best guess when you're gonna need them. It's like,
yeah.
well, I'll try to hold on as long as I can until I feel like I've done a lot, but maybe that's not enough, you know, or you know.
Well, like ammo conservation is one of the best ways to make games scary because even if the game gives you way too much ammo, usually just the anxiety of thinking, "Oh my god, I can run out of ammo," is enough to make you scared.
Yeah, or another way to do it is have your weaponry be not that effective. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I remember until I got later up, like Clive Barker's Undying was kind of like that, where it's like you have like you have a revolver that's like slow to reload and like it doesn't do a lot of damage to the monsters. So it's yeah, that can work well too if your weaponry is not that great. Like it can work, but well, Silent Hill tends to be good about that. Or
Yeah,
Silent Hill 2.
Silent Hill is probably it's such an easy game. Like you, but you don't think about how easy it is because it's scary as hell. The music is horrible. The atmosphere is horrible. So you're like, but if you remove that, if you got that game and removed all the textures and removed all the music, it would be the most boring game you've ever played in your entire life. Just clicking on doors until one opens. But
Well,
no
I
one
mean,
remembers that.
there are things that try to kill you or you have to escape from. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
but they're not. Then I think you're thinking that it's like hard because you're running automatically. But if you actually stood there and let it hit you, you'd be like, "Oh,
well,
this
that's
kind of
true. I
ruins
have
it."
no idea how much damage they do, but
Exactly because you never let it hit you. That's brilliant in my opinion. That is how you make a horror. Like I said, if you removed all of the art from that game and music,
you know
the
what?
game would be bad.
Hey, that just gave me an idea. Maybe any designers might want to take this in the future. If you're making a scary game, what you might want to do is make the first couple hits not so damaging. But by the time you get to like the third or fourth, they're taken. It can increase exponentially. So it's like if it gets you once, you're like, oh God, I got to get out of here, or really. But if you just, that way, it's not just pecking at you for like 30 seconds and removing the fear that way. You
Yeah,
could, that could work, that like have the damage increase exponentially, like the longer you're letting this thing hit you, you know? Because then it's still keeping you in the game if you're scared and you're trying your best to, but it's not letting you just idle past it, you know, treat it too
yeah.
casually.
Well, like that's like in the original Resident Evil, like your brain, when you get hit, when you get taken, like, I don't even know. I actually can't answer this question whether clicking the buttons makes the zombie let go of you faster. But I can guarantee 99% of people are like mashing every
Oh
button because
yeah.
you don't want it to happen. You're like,
I don't remember. I think when they do, I want to say it does when they grab you, but I'm not sure.
I think that's just that's how you react to it, isn't it? Like your brain just automatically reacts to that.
Yeah,
That's why
it
when
could.
it puts it on screen, it's like QuickTime events are just like when it puts it on screen, it feels fake. And you don't even need to put it on screen because 99% of people mash the buttons anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking earlier when you mentioned like was it Mr. X or in Resident Evil 2, that might have actually undercut Resident Evil 3 a bit because I felt like, well, isn't this kind of just the same thing that you had in 2? But
Yeah.
it's
Ironically, Resident Evil 3 remake, they try to not do what they did with the Resident Evil 2 remake, which was show him too much because they show him so much in the remake that he becomes not scary. So I think ironically, you see Nemesis less in the remake than you do in the original, probably.
and then the chat's asking us what we think about the game Pathologic. I feel like Pathologic is for a different kind of person than me. It's like this is someone like I'm like to give you an analogy. Like if you're going to an art museum, I want to see art that I find kind of like wondrous and interesting, and another person is going to look at some like mundane art and try to figure out like the subtle context behind it or something.
Well, that actually brings us on to a really great question. But first, can I
Okay.
quickly just go to the toilet?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'll
Yeah,
talk to the
be back.
chat.
Yeah,
Um,
keep them busy.
let's see. I noticed the chat was kind of slowing down a lot. At one point it was slowing down so much that I was thinking, "Uh-oh, I hope like something's not going on with Twitter that people have been disconnected." But the eye tracking for the early SZR detection in or out of VR. I don't know what SZR is, but yeah, okay. For pathologic, I mean, yeah, the setting was interesting. I mean, I tried playing a little bit of it, and then I wasn't really getting into it. And then later I watched like a playthrough or analysis of it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm glad I did not try to play through this. It's not my kind of game. I think like when I play games, my goal is to enjoy myself, and there are different ways of doing that. Getting a lot into the mood of something can be an enjoyment in itself. But with pathologic, it's like they're making a statement too, and like it's very easy to kind of fail or like not know what you're doing and kind of screw yourself. And some of the mechanics just look like really tedious. But see, some other players will see that as a challenge, like, oh, this game is trying to make my life hell. Okay, okay, and then like they want to get around that. Where I'm just like, no, I like having my challenges known and like be easy to understand, like what I'm up against, that sort of thing. Let's see. Combat is consistent if you know what you're doing. I'm not. Oh, for patholo. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Because I'm thinking, Russ, it's been a really emotionally exhausting day. I don't even know what to ask. I was feeling so out of it just a couple hours ago because it's been pretty hot. But I had some, my wife saw this. Apparently, well, I mean, she saw this somewhere. I'm assuming this is accurate. Apparently, like if you're under a lot of stress, that can kind of drain. It might even be the vitamin itself or vitamin C that can kind of drain your reserves, either of vitamin C or whatever vitamin C provides in your body. So if you find yourself really stressed, you might want to eat some foods high in vitamin C or take a pill, a vitamin C supplement. And I mean, I'm not sure, but like I've done that the past few times. It's been stressful. Yeah, somebody's saying they've been hitting 102 degrees weather there. So yeah, that would.
Jesus, that is disgusting.
Yeah, yeah, I would not. Well, I have a fan blowing on me right now, so
When you
it's.
grew up in what's it called? I'm not good with American states. Which
Oh,
one do you
okay.
grow
Well,
up?
I was born in Louisiana, but I grew up in Virginia.
Was that hot?
It could be. It's it's kind of middle of the road. Louisiana is a furnace, though. Like I think I've told this before, but to give you an idea how hot it is in Louisiana, later I lived there for about a year, staying with relatives, and like I would go running at night, like just the middle of the night, and that was the first time I literally had to stop, not because I was out of energy, but because I got so hot, like I just couldn't get rid of the heat. And what I ended up having to do later was, I mean, this was in summer, was basically just take like a cup of water and just dump it over my head so that way it's I was cooling enough, and that would be enough for me to run in the middle of the night in Louisiana. That's how hot it was, because it's like the humidity's always really high there. So, and the heat, you don't get a break on it. So it's.
Think one thing that people, when like in England, it's got really hot recently, and Americans look at the temperature and they're like, "Oh, that's nothing. You people are pansies." And it's like, they don't understand that the way our houses are built, and you probably have the same in Poland. The houses are built to retain heat because the winters
Yeah.
used to be brutal. So when the heat gets in, like it's actually been raining all week, and it's probably still 25 in here because when the heat's in, it doesn't come out. So yeah, ACs are like gonna be mandatory in the next like 5 years or so. I just know
Yeah,
it.
and the windows here don't really accommodate them. Like
No.
it's kind of a for homes in a lot of Europe. They're not designed for air conditioners. We're just any almost any American home, you just lift the window, put the unit
Yeah,
in there.
my
So
friend just bought one, and we've got the windows where like it's to stop you from killing yourself. So you open it and it like pulls out, but it only goes like that wide. And it's the AC is made for like windows that just go like that, like the ones you pull to the side. So we're there, like we're not engineers, and we're staring at this window like, how the hell do we figure this out?
somebody emailed me. I tell you, I'll put that in the chat. Somebody emailed me. Apparently, there is a solution for those windows that can kind of come out at the side. It looked pretty exotic, and it's not so hot that I'm just like, all right, that like I just feel like I'm in hell, and like I'll do anything for air conditioning. So it's not at that level yet, but hey, maybe you give it a couple more summers and might get there.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll give a link to this European window air conditioning that the fan sent me.
Yeah, I think the one I saw was you have to. It's like Velcro, and you Velcro it on.
Yeah, it's like some sort of sleeve or something, but I
Yeah.
think it had like a bracket to like keep it open in place, or I'm not sure. There definitely was somebody had thought about this, so we'll see. Maybe in the future that's when it ends up having to happen. But
So one thing I heard was that they're going to start. The America is thinking of like literally building sunglasses for like the Earth, where they'll put like a thing up to like try. Oh my! I'm just like, how have we got to the point where we're literally doing things they would do in The Simpsons to try and save the planet? Like
yeah,
build the
you
world
know,
sunglasses.
I was gonna mention it in a follow up. I'll mention it here too. It could things could get nuts enough that's really the only sane option. However, like what I mentioned, the sulfur dioxide in the
I don't want to get to
atmosphere
that.
in the conquest Earth.
I don't want to get to that, Ross.
The thing is, sulfur. I'm not against it in concept. It's just that we don't want sulfur dioxide. That's a key component of acid rain. If there's I think someone told me there is a compound that's much more benign and wouldn't cause like an environmental disaster that sulfur dioxide is. But hey, sulfur dioxide is cheaper. Gotta save some bucks when you're to save the world, right? And make and rain down acid rain all over the planet, you know. So it's not that I'm against the concept if things got that dire, but I'm definitely against using sulfur dioxide to do it, you know. So
Here's a question for you. So, I was actually watching something about nuclear power plants. Do you think that the like the bad press at nuclear power? Do you think the reason we moved away from nuclear power was because people were genuinely scared of it, or do you think power companies saw it as a less money making measure and used the bad press that it was getting to kind of be like, well, you know what, we're making a lot of money selling petrol and fossil fuels. Let's stick to that a bit longer before we jump on the power plants. What do you think?
um I don't know. Actually, this one potential guest I might be having wanted to talk to me all about nuclear stuff. However, that
Ooh,
was going to be trickier because he said that he's not good at just prompting and talking on his own, but he's good at answering questions. So I'll basically have to come up with an entire list of questions for him for that one to make sure it
that's
goes.
a good
But
question for him then.
yeah, that would be a question for him. I'm not aware of that I know of. What and it's not that the fossil. I mean, I could be wrong. It's not that the fossil fuel industry isn't easily willing to manipulate all of society and our potential survival of humanity to keep things in business. However, in that particular case, you know, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island was a scare, and Chernobyl was one of the worst things to ever happen environmentally, and could have been incredibly worse
Yeah,
than
we
like if
we
it had.
there's
Go
a
ahead.
bad timeline. There's a bad timeline where we effed that up so bad
Oh
that
yeah,
I'm dead. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah, pretty much. Like that was so the fear was real and it was justified. And the thing is, politics have not gotten more responsive since then. Like all the laws and everything that went into place were like okay at the time we erred on the side of caution because we cannot have another Chernobyl. Period. However, if the laws get set like that and then we realize that like okay well we have better technology now maybe we should ease up on it, well too bad our political system's kind of
Yeah.
calcified so that you're not going to get that kind of change. And
Hey, let's say Chernobyl was a pretty big show on HBO, so even public
yeah, I
opinion is
watched it.
probably.
It's good. It's well
Oh,
done.
I freaking loved it.
Yeah,
But I'm I'm not saying nuclear power is the greatest thing ever, but currently, compared to what we're doing, it's the lesser of two evils. But then
my
you see a show like Chernobyl, and it's so good, and that was a beautiful show,
my
and it
attitude
makes me
is
go,
for where we are in society right now for the problems that we're facing, nuclear strikes me as the least worst option. That's
yeah.
the way I would describe it. Because, I mean, you can. I mean, I guess the only thing better would be something like geothermal, but that's not as. I think there's not as many places you can do that. But I mean, maybe with drilling technology, we should look into that more because I, that's a whole conversation in itself. But I mean, my understanding is like solar and wind. It's like they have some uses, but for like steady baseline power supply, which our entire grid depends on, and unless we have just an incredible breakthrough in battery technology, it's not really going to solve the problems that we're facing. And
I think
it's
the problem with that is that whatever information you've got on that, how much can you even trust it? Like, if imagine like in there could be, for all we know, solar power could be incredible. It could be the greatest. Like they've created something that like draws so much power, and they've got these batteries. Are they going to show it, or are they just going to be like, let's just like you even mentioned it with Kodak, where Kodak created a digital
yeah.
camera, and they were like, well, let's just leave that till later,
Well,
until because we're making so much money on this. Why make something that makes it for free? Do you know what I mean?
I'd say I mean, who knows with because I mean with
They could be
power
hiding all of
structures,
it.
I'd say what's things are so interconnected now, and there's so many people with access to information. I would say if there was a breakthrough, and like let's say, fine, one company wants to bury it, another might find it, you know, and
Yeah.
then for the things that they patented it in order to sit on it, that might not. Patent law isn't as like completely locked down as the way copyright stuff is my understanding.
Mm.
So um, it might be the sort of thing like the telephone, where we it's not even I'm not even sure who invented it first because it was kind of being invented independently in different areas.
Yeah.
So I would think a breakthrough technology like that would happen. No, the two big problems I'm aware of with solar. Well, no, I think there's three. One is that the panels only kind of last for, I think it's like 20 years, maybe it's longer. It uses
Mm.
kind of rare earth minerals, and that can be kind of environmentally problematic. Now, that's still better than something like coal, but the thing is, it's not really a substitute. It's just kind of buying time, you know. Or it's better for uses where that's literally the only way you're going to get power because it's just too remote. Or the second is the baseline load, where if that's like even a little bit off with the electrical grid, then you fry systems, you're out of power, and like you can't. It doesn't provide the power reliably enough without some sort of breakthrough in the storage, you know,
Mm.
because it's fine if we produce power unreliably, but what's not fine is it being distributed unreliably. So,
Yeah, there's that YouTuber, is it Tom Scott? He talked about how I think it's a hydro plant, or it might be a wind. No, it's a wind farm in the ocean, and it makes enough power for like, pretty much probably all of the United Kingdom. But the problem is, that storing it is so difficult because you can only put it in a battery for so long, and it's so hard to get that. You'd have to build wires through the whole, from all the way to Scotland, all the way down.
yeah,
That
well, that was the other thing is that my understanding is that if we're talking strictly renewables, we can't meet the demand that we use. I mean, especially, I mean, maybe for some areas and maybe for just electricity, but when you start factoring in transportation and stuff like that, I mean, nuclear would buy us a hell of a lot more time, is my understanding of
yeah.
it. If I'm wrong, yeah. My email is rosswsky@gmail.com. You can let me know if I'm wrong. I
Ross
mean,
manifesto about it.
but yeah, so it's and if we want to be really cynical, it could be that fossil fuel companies are promoting things like wind and solar because they know they're not an actual threat to the models that they're relying upon. I mean, a whole lot of fossil fuel is for transportation, too. I mean, and a lot of power generations don't directly compete with that because we don't have anywhere near like the like electric transportation infrastructure that we do for
Yeah,
gas powered.
Germany. So Germany is doing something that pretty much America needs to jump on this ASAP. But I mean, even my country does, United Kingdom. So what Germany is doing is they're building electric cars, and they know the batteries just aren't good enough. That's why that company. Have you heard of Nikola? They're
I
that
guess
truck
not.
company. They're a truck company, and they haven't built a single truck, but they're worth like $7 billion because all of the venture capitalists are dumping their money in it because they know that electric trucks are the future. But what Germany are doing, have you ever, what are those bumper cars? You know how bumper
Yeah,
cars work? The electricity's on the top.
yeah.
They're building these like power lines, and they'll work like trains essentially. So they won't have batteries. They'll be on the roof, and the entire huge highway electric system will keep them running, kind of like trains, but trucks. And we need that because we can't just stop trucks. Like, how are you going to get food to people? It's just not
Yeah,
going to
see,
happen.
this is an unpopular view, but I think where we are at this point in time versus the scale of problems we're facing, I mean, again, this is unpopular, but I think the only way we have to scale down and just have a lot less cars on the road, period, have a robust train system, railway, because that's way more efficient. And for a lot of things, we're just going to have to lower productivity, and transportation for the average person is just going to take longer, and it's going to be a downgrade in many ways.
I'd
That
like to
doesn't
see
mean,
you give that speech in LA.
yeah, oh yeah, exactly. This will never. It's like I've said in, well, LA, friggin' a train in LA might work better. Like, but yeah, no, it's like I said, I know my politics are fantasy, but it's like I'm trying to envision a scenario where it's not Mad Max, as far as our transportation design. Like,
Is that a desert you like?
what?
Mad Max, is that a desert that you enjoy?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on in that in that one, Yeah, yeah. Well, especially the newest one for Fury
Yeah, it looked
Road.
great.
Yeah, that one's very atmospheric with its desert.
I love what you said in one of your recent. I don't want to bring up your episodes too
No,
much
it's
because
fine.
I could just gush. But I loved what you said, like how it's very achievable to build your own Mad Max world. Like, there's some billionaire is building like this future city in the middle of the desert, and only he's going to be able to. I don't even think he's going to be able to do it, to be honest. And it made me think, like, he should just build like a junk town from like Fallout. That would look just as cool, and that's cheaper to do. And people
Yeah,
will go
yeah.
there.
I mean, yeah. You need some junkyard cars, some guy willing to weld a bunch of stuff, and like a thrift store raid for equipment. That's all you need for a Mad
Yeah,
Max. Okay, somebody listed
some
an
old guns.
interesting comment here. They're saying,
Hmm.
there's a quote. They're saying nuclear reactors provide only 10% of electricity globally. Electricity is only a small fraction of energy required to sustain the present civilization. After 7 decades of unprecedented subsidies, political support, tolerance of their toxic waste, and ignorance of their contribution to nuclear proliferation, nuclear reactors still provide only 4% of global energy. It's a fantasy to imagine they will ever raise the limits to growth. Well, I'm confused by the last sentence. Like, raise the limits. Well, no, we're not. I'm not even talking about like raising the limits. Talking about like shoring up the decline. Um, I mean, well, the thing is, nuclear hasn't been uh, explored on this. I mean,
On a large scale.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of regulations and political like jam ups preventing it from happening. I mean, yeah, if you're judging our power demands by the number of reactors we have today, then that's probably right.
Well, the problem is loud accidents. Some accidents are louder than small accidents. So,
Yeah.
more, as you've said before in one of your videos, like some people have literally died due to pollution. But you
Oh,
don't hear those
lots.
because
Yeah.
they just die. But when something like Fukushima happens, which was, that was unforeseeable, really. It was a natural disaster. I know it had a human element to it, but it was a natural disaster. That was much louder than if, you have a person going, by the way, I don't know how many, a lot of people died in
Yeah,
China
then
because,
100,000 people dying a year from lung cancer, which could directly be linked to the air
yeah, exactly.
pollution from coal.
Yeah,
It's not. It's a less obvious killer.
yeah,
That's why
it's
I say
quite,
least. We're talking about the waste. Um, I mean, we have. I've heard actually now that like the drilling we do for fracking, where you drill down below the water table. Uh, if we basically put it in barrels and dig it that deep, that's might be pretty safe. Like especially if it was like on site, where it's basically where even if it leaks, it's unlikely to go anywhere because it's just or reach anywhere that could harm people. And if it's deep below the water table, that might work. I mean, that's why I didn't say like no, it's the ants. I know when I did the new beginning episode, there were some people that I thought they were being kind of hyperbolic, saying that like there's no problems with nuclear, it's 100% safe. It's like, well, it's 100% safe if nothing goes wrong, And however, oh yeah, well that's the other thing, like with thorium reactors. I mean, thorium's very plentiful, is my understanding, as far as the mineral goes. and that's just. I think maybe somebody said like there's like a prototype one in India now, or I mean that's one. It sounds like it's pure politics that hasn't gotten off the ground. So
It's ironic. I thought like shit talking Resident Evil 2 would get the chat getting a bit annoyed, but it seems that us talking about nuclear has kind of got the chat a bit more lively.
sure, yeah, I'm actually a bit ignorant on a lot of the details of Fukushima, so
Yeah, me too. Like, but like,
I need to
like
research that
from my
more.
perspective, which is I don't know anything. I thought it was something, but people, it seems like people are saying that it actually was quite foreseeable, which is quite disappointing.
Yeah, and the thing is, you shouldn't downplay. I mean, it depends on the type of radioactivity, but I mean, if it's the time of radioactivity where yeah, it doesn't do much, but it does last 10,000 years. You know, I can understand where people still aren't
I might
cool with
be
that.
upset
But
about that.
when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can, when I say least worst, it's like if you compare like the energy we need just to basically put food on the table, you know, or run hospitals or things like that. And then you consider the damage of something like you mentioned Germany, they're going back to coal lately because of the whole
yeah.
energy scrub. So it's like,
Australia, Australia is coal hungry at the moment.
and nuclear can be worse than coal. I mean, obviously, Chernobyl is an almost worst case scenario. And
Someone
that's
just
what.
brought up something really interesting is people as I said, like the quiet he's saying that solar kills a lot of people because when they're putting it up, if they fall off a roof they might die and stuff. Like those are the kind of numbers you don't think about, Jerry. Like,
Yeah, well, see
you know,
that's where you know if you could get struck by lightning too if you're outside. You know, I
yeah,
mean, there's some if the risk is so minimal that or and preventable. That's the other thing.
yeah.
I'm willing to let a lot slide if the risk is very preventable. But and the and the consequences. Okay, it's that individual who fell off the roof. You know, whereas if the we best I was gonna say best I could tell we're not gonna have another Chernobyl, but there is that I think was it the Zaporozhia? I forget the power
What's that?
plant. There was one power plant in Ukraine that was might still be
Oh
like
yes,
at risk.
they were
Where if
attacking
you
it. Yeah.
a modern nuclear power, I should say that a modern nuclear power plant is not going to have a Chernobyl level risk. So now that does not mean no risk, and that does not mean a risk that could last a hell of a long time. However, if you consider with the more immediate stuff that we're doing with again from coal that is happening on our
Yeah.
watch and you know with harm to people.
Did you watch or have you seen any of the documentaries on the cleanup of Chernobyl? The I can't remember what I called it. What's the sarcophagus?
I guess I haven't. I have seen some documentaries where they go and visit it, and it's just
No, the one on fixing it is you would love it. So it's about
I
all of
don't
these
know.
countries had to come together, like all the countries who are like, you know what, we're gonna get effed if we don't fix this ourselves. They all come together, all these different countries, to build a self-cleaning machine. So they basically, because they realize dumping cement on it is not going to do anything. You need to eventually, because it will eventually go to the groundwater and it will eventually get in the wind. So they build a robot that is slowly getting the stuff out and piling it, and so they can retrieve it. And it's going to take 150 years to like fix it. But it was absolutely such an interesting watch how much money went into, and it's one of the times where like there was, you know, when you hear like spending on something, you're like, oh my god, why did they spend 150 billion on this jet or whatever? That was one of those ones where I was like, you know what, we needed to spend this $1 billion getting this fixed.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, you and I get that, and probably most of the people watching get that. But even then, there'll be some people they never get it. Like it's always
Yeah.
money. Period. It's like, well, it's you know if it's like an old comedian. I forget what it is, but it's something like the joke is, you know, a guy's getting mugged and he's saying like your money or your life, and then he pauses like, "What are you doing?" It's like I'm thinking, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
and then there's some people with not insignificant amount of power who think that
Thing
way.
like that.
So,
Oh
well, that's
yeah.
kind of
Well,
what I was getting at with the sulfur dioxide. It's like, yeah, sulfur is cheaper, but considering how we're talking about, you know, basically our only option, possibly our only option for halting global warming versus or reversing, uh, versus and poisoning the earth, with acid rain. It's like maybe we should spend the extra bucks to get the right,
yeah.
to get a preferable compound if we have to go down that route. So,
Money is one of those things. Like for me, I feel like there is some money can do such psychological damage to people. Like there seems to be two types of people who have got a lot of money. There's people who have you ever heard of Asmongold? He's like a streamer and he's like a millionaire.
I've seen pictures of him.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, and he's like a millionaire, but he showed pictures of his room, and it looks like your 14-year-old friend who never cleaned up their room. There's blood on the wall from when like he wipes his teeth and stuff, from like because he's got he doesn't go to the dentist. So you got people like that who they stockpile their money, and you would never know that they're rich. Do you know what I mean? Because they just don't know what to do with it, or they don't want to do anything with it. Then you got people who stockpile their money and they don't want to spend it, but they want to keep earning it. Like they've gone beyond the point where they can spend it on something. As you said, you would spend it on like a turn the Grand Canyon into a theme park or something. Like
well,
they
yeah,
don't
if I
even
was a
have
kid,
those
yeah.
kind of plans. They don't even have those kind of plans. But for some reason, they're obsessed with keep doing it. They can't stop. Like to the point where like Jeff Bezos, I think he's got to the point where he was like, you know what, I've basically won. Like I'm max level in this RPG. It's time to start giving my items away to the lower level people. Where he's trying to do some good, but it's a bit too late.
Yeah, well,
But that's not often
there's
that happens.
there's probably two angles of that because one, it would probably just be a form of kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, like a hoarder, that
Yeah, I
is,
think that's what money does to some people.
and the other would be is if their money is the point scoring system for just egos among other people trying to be rich. So this is their version of competitive gaming. So rather than
Yeah,
getting like the most kills, they're getting like the most money. And
yeah, it is like an
and
MMO.
unfortunately, the way our system is structured, that has incredibly damaging consequences. Whereas if you're just spending a bunch of time getting kills in Counter Strike or something, that fine, that's pretty minimal impact on everybody else.
Actually brings me up to a great point. This wasn't a question, but I'm glad you brought it. I'm assuming you've heard of Escape from Tarkov.
Yeah.
So in gaming, like people, you've got money, you've got in-game money, you've got in-game items. Most of the time, like if you lose that, you can live. But one thing that modern gaming is starting to take advantage of to make things more like tense is time. And I know you've talked about you've played DayZ and like you'll be running around and you just get shot. And I think, do you like games like Escape from Tarkov where if you die, you have lost so much personal effort. It's not, you haven't just lost a
I
match,
don't,
you've lost
but
hours.
I don't, but I can understand where people would. I mean, that's going to be a thrill and keep it more suspenseful and exciting in a way that a game with lower stakes wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
It's
get
one of the
it,
only
but
ways.
that's too much. Yeah, that's too much, too high stakes for me, but
Like, imagine if you were playing a game and then, like, you die, but imagine if someone said, okay, if you die in this game, I'm going to lock you in a room for an hour with no stimulation. You would be like, okay, I really don't want to die now. Because I really don't want to be stuck in an
yeah,
hour.
no, I mean,
in a
I get where well, it's like a hardcore mode in games. Like, I get where the thrill is coming from, why people want to
Yeah.
do it, but for me personally, the risk versus reward ratio doesn't work for me because
Yeah.
I mean, if it's suspense, like, well, again, I mentioned like with a horror game, fine. If I can only save at certain points, I'm okay with that because I'm kind of trusting that the developer is pacing this for normal person, so this is going to be scarier doing it this way, but it's like a sane duration. I I'm hopefully not having to go longer than like 20 or 30 minutes in between a save where like
Yeah.
the stakes are getting way too high for me. But
Do you like roguelikes in general? For me, like I said, I like
yeah, it
Metroidvanias.
depends. It just kind of depends on the game, but yeah, some of them I've enjoyed.
I think the second I die, if I'm in the same area again I've got to start from there, for me that just turns me off completely. Like one of my favorite things to do in a game is just be presented new things. Like even if I die and go somewhere else, that's okay because I'm seeing something new.
Well, with roguelikes, they usually have some random generation to kind of keep it different. I realize what I like in roguelikes, which I'd say this is actually probably not most of them, whereas if you're really good, you can potentially do it first playthrough.
Yeah.
Like if you are just awesome, and then if you die, okay, it gives you a little bit more advantage. I'm all right with that because what I don't like is you have no chance the first time. Like
Yeah.
you're basically gonna have to die a few times till you get some upgrades, and then it becomes like a sane level. But there's some where if you're just really good, you can do it first try, and I like that. So because then I feel like, oh man, I didn't make it. It's like, well, okay, well now I'm getting a little bit more of an edge. Maybe I can do it this time. And it's like, oh, if I die, okay, well, maybe I can do it this time. So it kind of keeps me thinking that, like, it kind of makes, if I feel like I think I can maybe do this, even if I can't. If it's making me think that, then that's a good place to be in mentally.
So the thing I was going to ask before I went to the toilet, someone brought up pathologic,
Yeah.
and one of the questions was that I obviously sent to you was, are there games that you love hearing about but will never play?
Oh yeah.
Like Dwarf Fortress. Like I love hearing about Dwarf Fortress, but I will never play it. It's too complicated. I don't understand it, but I will listen to people's stories about
Oh
it because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
Dwarf
interesting.
Fortress is an example. That's not one that I would never play. It's more like there's a lot of games out there. Like if Dwarf Fortress had come out in the '90s, where there was a lot less competition for
Yeah.
stuff, and it's like maybe I would have taken the plunge because that's a hell of a learning curve. So I have to question, well, okay, am I going to enjoy this so much that this learning curve is worth it? And like managerial type games aren't necessarily like my favorite. It just kind of varies. So for me, the ratio just isn't there in my mind. But yeah, well, I mentioned in my birthday video a while back, actually, a lot of MMOs are like that, where like there's too many barriers for me to really get into it. But I love hearing like the stories about it,
Yeah,
like
the
when there's,
the human element.
yeah, where they do these politics and drama going on, or just like outrageous things that are happening in the
Yeah.
game. Y-
Sephiric mentioned in the chat Eve. I don't know anything about Eve Online, and I know Frederick Knutson, who's like a YouTuber, he's doing like an 8-hour video on it, so I'm really looking forward to that. But like, I don't know anything about Eve, how it plays, but I just know that that is one of those games where the whole point of it is to take it as seriously as possible and then completely ruin it by doing something like catastrophic.
I don't even know if I would call that the whole point. I would say, like, for some of the players, it's almost like a lifestyle decision for EVE Online, where you're managing like your life in space and your empire or the corporation you're with and political intrigue and stuff like that. Where,
Who
uh,
would you be?
what?
Who would you be in Eve?
Oh, I don't know enough about it, but I mean, I played a little, I played like maybe 20, 30 minutes. I still need to learn the basic. I
I guess
kind
what
of
I'm
want to,
saying, would you be chaotic neutral?
oh,
Would you be a good guy or?
well, if it was in Eve, well, if I actually intend to play some more of Eve or to find out if I want to play enough of it where I already know I'm not going to want to get into it hardcore, like try to make lots of money. What I would want to
Mhm.
do is see as many locations as I can where I just don't care if my ship gets destroyed or not, and just kind of see the site, have a tour of it essentially.
Yeah.
And that would be because I know Eve is too beyond me for that. But no, let's say I was into it. You're talking about my alignment. Like I tend to drift towards kind of chaotic neutral, where like let's just keep poking things until something happens. Kind of like like just seeing things break out where you don't really have like a moral issue with what you're doing. You're just trying to get things exciting or fights to break out, that sort of thing. Or I'm trying to remember some examples, but I'm drawing a bit of a blank. But yeah, I guess the other thing is turn-based combat games where I really like the theme. I may try to give BattleTech a shot. I probably won't get far into it at all.
Which one's Battletech?
BattleTech is this one where it's like this kind of mech warrior type game, except it's like you're almost. It has a lot of lore to it that I would find interesting, and it has a story too, like this kind of war campaign where your mechs are dynastic, where this has been like passed down to your family, and it's almost like you're feuding lords, where like your mech is like the source of your family's power, like the mechs that you control. And like it sounded like this whole other society with like a lot of thought put in the story. I'm thinking, wow, this sounds pretty awesome. I should check that
Cool
out.
idea. So it's like the sword your father passes down to you.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
take one in a
exactly.
big
And except this is like more
yeah,
directly
mech.
tied to your family's power too. It's not
Yeah,
just your birthright and your the power structure, but like this is how you're maintaining it.
yeah,
At least that was my understanding of it. Um I guess another one is crafting games that are just way too hardcore for me. Like,
yeah,
we're talking like we're like I've tried multiple times to play what was it, Don't Starve, and then I just realized
yeah.
early on, like, you know what, I like the theme of this game, I like where it's going, and maybe what gets more mysterious as you get deeper into this world, but these crafting mechanics, they're just too much for what I want to deal with. Like if a game starts genuinely feeling like work, then like I'm kind of out. But however, I may still like the theme, so maybe I can watch on YouTube somebody who's enjoying this and willing to distill it. Or what was it? Sunless Sea. That was another one I tried to get into,
Yeah,
but
these.
it was a little too much for me. But however, I'm totally on board with it thematically. So it's
I'm
like, yeah,
assuming
show me
you're
more of
wanting to
the
play. Is it Darkwood?
Darkwood. Yeah, that Darkwood. That one wasn't as extreme, at least from what I played. But it's just, it was feeling like it was feeling like a game where you're kind of gonna need to do some trial and error to figure out what you should be doing, or maybe a lot of trial and error. And then there are consequences for this too. It's not like a trial and error where like you make a mistake, bam, you're immediately back where you were, like pretty quickly. Where the game encourages you to kind of experiment with things.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, Darkwood, I'm absolutely gonna finish a playthrough of, or finish watching a playthrough of. Or yeah, the theme was pretty cool. I like this atmosphere and the story and where it's going with it, but it just was what it was asking of me was like a bit much for my preferences. So
Yeah, but it's like with Pathologic, I love hearing about it. I just wouldn't play it personally because I'm just not good with janky first person games. Like first person for me needs to feel quite smooth. So when it's like janky and you're getting stuck on stuff, or like it's really annoying because there's like you shoot and it doesn't hit anything, it I just can't look past that. I can look past a lot of stuff in games, but in first person games, if it's even slightly janky, I just can't get into it for some reason. I don't know why. Like I like Tomb Raider on the PS1. Do you know what I mean? So you'd think I would
see,
be able to.
I don't think it's fair to put Pathologic like that because I've played janky first person shooters. I can deal with jank, like, but Pathologic, it's like there's a lot of things you're gonna need to figure it out. You're gonna need to figure out, and I can tell I'm not gonna figure this out. without spending like a week playing this. You know, and it's more than just jank. Jank I can deal with. Like yeah, like with the Realms of the Haunting, that was probably one of the jankier games I did for first-person shooters, where I have to like hit the button to switch back in between aiming, and even then
Yeah,
it's like a
I can't
little
keep with that.
jittery, uh, or I've done keyboard aiming. I don't like it, but I've done it. Well, actually, I played Serious Sam Next Encounter on an emulator where I used mouse emulation to basically emulate the gamepad. And yeah,
Yeah,
it was janky for sure, like the whole game. But I was able to play it enough to like get through it and like okay, I can basically kind of keep it together playing this, and I'm not gonna like increase the difficulty or anything. So uh, I can handle jank, but there's a difference between jank versus in order to have anything remotely resembling a good time for my taste, you need to know what's coming, or you have to know this mechanic, and the game's not going to tell you. And
yeah,
I don't like stuff like that. I don't. Basically, if a game wants to throw me in blind, then it needs. I want the demands it's making of me to kind of be reasonable, you know, or or it has to be something extra. Like if you want to find like the secret ending, you have to know this. But if
yeah.
you can play through normally like this and not
Yeah,
know
like
about.
Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 has some really cryptic stuff to get the extra endings,
Oh yeah.
but you can complete it and still get something from it.
You know, it's funny, and I love how I didn't know this actually when I first played it, but in Silent Hill 2, like the first three endings, they're dependent on your gameplay style. They're not
Yeah,
even. That's awesome. I wish more games would do something like that. And what's funny is two of my friends played it, and we each got different endings depending. Like I got the one where I was playing it like I play Resident Evil, where I'm keeping my character on the brink of death because I don't know when I'm going to need that healing stuff in the future. So I better hold on to it to absolutely maximize my health because that's the
yeah,
way Resident Evil is. Like you don't use that full healing unless you friggin'
yeah,
need it, you know. Uh, and then even the minor healing in Resident Evil, it's like it can be combined to make the full healing. So you might want to hold on to that too. So
healing anxiety. Yeah,
and I was looking at the yeah I was looking apparently like you shouldn't like look at the knife multiple times. Where I was trying to like figure out puzzles, like I kept looking at it, and so I was doing like everything to get that ending and not even realizing it. And another one of my friends was what was the other ending? Yeah, well, he was playing it like completely paranoid, and so he was max health at all times, like trying to keep the character alive. So we got a different one, and then we figured the other one must have been really protective of the female character that accompanies you, and he got
right.
the different egg. So we all three of us got different endings organically. So I thought that was great. So
Yeah, it's kind of like a non-binary. You play Mass Effect, and it's like, do you want to do good or bad? And you're like, I'll do bad, and then you get the bad ending. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's more interesting when it's like you picked up this and you did this with it, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know it would do that, but that's
and the
interesting.
thing is, that doesn't even have to be like a moral gray area. It just has to
Yeah,
be a
okay,
different style or preference for what you
yeah,
rather do. I
yeah.
mean,
Like you play Fallout, and like instead of talking to people, you just go around shooting them. The ending should possibly, represent that more. But instead, what it does is like, do you want to blow up this town? And you're like, yes. And you're like, oh, you got the ending where you blow up the town. It's like, well, that doesn't. That was just because I clicked yes.
yeah. Well, I mean, what if your endings were more based on like your intelligence stat? Like, if you're a moron, you're getting a different ending
Yeah, you're
than
not
if
gonna
you
get
were
the good.
smart.
Yeah,
Like, that would be
exactly.
better. Or if you're more charismatic or not. You know, you're
Yeah,
like it's something that kind of drifted towards like your play style that because they do that with all kinds of RPGs already with gameplay type like some can kind of you can talk your way out of more things or others are more stealthy or others are just guns blazing you know it's
yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea. I think it's a great idea of getting the ending based on your like your personality or play style more than your.
Yeah, now you mention it, it doesn't really make much sense when you put your charisma as 0 and you still get like the best ending, and you'd be like, well, how would a person with 0 charisma and 0 intelligence save the world? Unless they were like a bumbling like, and you could still do it. Like maybe what's that game you reviewed? And like, you play as the prince and he's like bumbling everywhere.
Oh, Kyrandia?
Yeah, like like that was like he bumbled. He was like a comedy. He
Yeah,
like
well, it's a
bumbled
comic.
himself into like
There's plenty of
yeah,
comedy in that game. It's not meant
yeah,
to be serious. So.
yeah. But I agree. I think more games should be like, if you've got 0 intelligence or 1 intelligence, maybe you accidentally save the world.
For some reason, I was having a flashback to the Jerky Boys movie where they call this guy says he has connections to the mob, so they're hoping they can get to throw them a. They're hoping they can like have a night out at the mob's expense. Show them a good time restaurant show, that sort of thing. And the first guy calls and he says, "Yeah, I know this guy," and he tells them to go screw himself. And then so it's like, here, you don't know how to talk to these people. And then he does his prank phone call persona, talking like a real tough guy. Like he's actually getting the mob concerned about who this is, and that like they maybe need to fear him. And it says, yeah, we'll send someone to pick up your boys here at like. And I was thinking that's an example of like using like speechcraft to kind of get your way
Yeah.
with to kind of influence the plot there.
Someone's saying I recommend Road Warden. I've never heard of that game.
I don't know that one either.
Hmm.
Pretty good.
Is that like
If neither one of us know.
Disco Elysium kind of has that, where you can bumble your way into like doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, somebody's mentioning if you're a total moron in Outer Worlds and reprogram the hyperdrive, you send the ship directly into the sun. Yeah,
I love that. Like you I like when you can be stupid and it has stupid results.
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's great.
Give me a sec.
So
Anyway,
I
let me
think you
just
have even more questions actually, but
yeah.
though we've been going close to 3 hours,
Yeah.
so we'll try
Yeah.
to. I'll try to go shorter on some of these. So.
Yeah. Oh, that was it. One of them is, do you enjoy things that you didn't enjoy when you were younger, but you enjoy them now just because of nostalgia?
Oh, oh, okay, so I didn't enjoy them when I was younger, but I do now.
Well, it's more that. So, a great example is someone in the 2000s drew a picture of Tails from Sonic wearing a 9-inch nail shirt. And if I'd saw that in the 2000s, I would be like, that is very embarrassing and edgy. But now, in an ironic sense, I think it's kind of cool. It's like, oh, okay, like it's referencing the 2000s when I grew up. I'm nostalgic for that, you know. So I kind of enjoy it more. But back in the day, I thought it made me cringe.
I guess not really the. I mean, there are the things I enjoy now that I wouldn't when I was younger would be things that are like more subtle humor where you kind of need your brain to be more mature to understand everything that's going on that just would have flown past me as a kid. Like you get jokes that you weren't getting as a kid, that sort of thing. But I mean, if it's something I thought, uh, I don't know. I mean, I guess if I thought something was, well, there's been a little bit of the reverse too. Like I think I mentioned in Sin that like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's like I still like the
Yeah,
idea of like the mutants and the fighting, but like no, this dialogue's for kids. It's just I
yeah,
can't go back to this. So I kind of grew out of a few things, but no, if it's not that I can think of. So I
yeah.
mean,
There's
I
some
guess I
things
can
I
look
watched as a
back at
kid.
things that I forgot about, and but even then, it's more like I don't really like it so much as like, oh, I'm glad we got past that. Like I remembered in the Phantasmagoria 2 episode with the emails, I forgot that old email didn't used to have like your threads of email. You used to get like a separate email in your inbox for every single message. I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Because so it's not that uh, it's not that I like it so much as it's just like, oh, I completely forgot this existed. Okay, that's interesting that, the bad old days are gone. So
Are you a fan of like office horror?
yeah, well, I love Phantasmagoria. Yeah, and
Yuppie Psycho?
I played a good, yeah, Yuppie Psycho. I love the beginning of it. Like, I played a few hours. I played several hours into that until the gameplay was kind of like, okay, it's kind of losing me a little bit.
It gets really hard, yeah.
Then I watched so I kind of played the first third or half, and then I played through the first few hours. I loved it. Like that was great.
It's ironic that like people see office life as like horror. Like it's a horrible. I work in an office, so I agree. But like, there's not actually, from my perspective, there's not many things involving offices as horror, except maybe Fear. But Fear is just more like using them as like set dressing. It's not exploring the horrors of working in an office.
What's great about that is that it combines the absolutely mundane with it just turns it upside down. It's like, well, wait, now there's somebody who might be killing people in the office
Yeah,
here, and then you have a
but you still have to go to
contrast.
work.
It creates a great contrast because then you're just back at the office, everything's
Yeah.
nice and neat, brightly lit, and it's just like, but the threat's still out there. Like it creates a yeah. Well, I
And it's
like that
funny because
aspect
you
of
get like the boss who's like, oh yeah, someone's dead. Anyway, have you done these reports? Because they need to be. It's like, that's how a boss would be. A boss would be like, yeah, it's sad that Kevin's dead, but work on Monday.
yeah, or
It won't go well.
well, it's a little different. It depends. Yuppie Psycho pulled it off, but if you go with that approach, you kind of have to sell it that this is like this surreal other thing because it can't be too real then because then it kind of takes you out of it. Whereas if there's some other threat that's going on kind of unseen by most of the office, but you're aware of it, then that's another style, Well, that's but yeah, well, Yuppie Psycho kind of had its own sort of separate reality going on that and it had plenty of comedy to it also. It worked.
And offices are just generally like disorientating. So it works well as like level design because you
Well,
can
they
just
can
be
be
like,
kind of dystopian too. Where
yeah,
everything's nice and neat. However, you're doing soul crushing work. So
yeah.
you have that kind of like
Well, you
dichotomy
mentioned it
going on.
yourself in what's that, Uncanny Valley, where it didn't lean enough into that, where it had this great idea to be like playing as this doing this really boring job where you would start to manifest things and
Yeah, yeah.
explore.
I love like the kind of slow burn descent, into
Yeah,
something. Okay, so yeah, let's run through some more questions if you have. See if we
yeah,
can get
sure.
through.
Give me that. Oh, has your thoughts on smartphones changed? I'm assuming not at all.
No, but I do have a smarter phone now. That was I should have brought it up here. It's downstairs. It actually does have like a LCD screen and everything. No, not LED. I always get it mixed up. IPS panel screen that it can do most of the modern functions, but I still don't use it for much more. If I had a much more active social life, I might think differently. But well
And one
actually,
question. Oh, go on.
okay, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Uh, I actually have heard a lot of people in Generation Z are actually going for dumber phones that they just can do the bare minimum now because they're kind of feeling overwhelmed by like the social bombardment that we get through phones or other
Yeah,
people get through phones that they do like the kind of like peace they get from being like away from their phone or just not having to keep on top of like every little update.
well, that's the one thing with analog horror. A lot of people think people are becoming obsessed with analog horror. It's just because VHS were creepy, but I think it's more the fact like for me personally, with digital technology, especially like I've got a phone that can take, you know, great pictures. I don't think they look great, but by a technical perspective, they're great. But from a subjective one, they're not. So I like to use like Polaroid cameras or 35mm cameras because I'm trying to pull away from everything being digital. And I think that's the one thing with analog horror. People want to kind of like feel like they're going back to something simpler because they're just like the horror of being obsessed with social media is something they want to ignore. So they rather delve into the horror of, oh, what if I'm in a haunted house and there's a VHS player with CCTV and there's a ghost?
Well,
It's a simpler way of dealing with it.
well, plus it's harder to pull off something scary where like everything's connected too, and you have all information at all times. Like
Did you watch Unfriended?
yeah, I have seen Unfriended.
Yeah.
There was there was one that was a little yeah. I mean, they tried, but
Yeah,
it's
they tried so hard.
like,
And it didn't work. In my
yeah,
opinion, anyway.
it's because I was thinking like the stuff I like that involve like digital technology, it's actually involved it getting cut out. Where the I think there was some mini series I saw where this was like in the future and a sci-fi thing, and but basically in the future everybody has like these neurological implants that serves as your phone connecting, and what's happening is basically everybody's I think they're either dying or getting their brain fried. However, it's following these people who are like deep in a parking garage where the signal's too weak for it to affect them. But they got all the information about what's happening until it all cut out. And then that was kind of scary and tense too, because it's like, well, how are they going to get out of here? Are they going to be able to like disable this or so? And the other one I thought of was oh yeah, there was this show. It was pretty decent. Jeez, I forgot the name of it. Where the plot premise is they're getting on this plane and they're basically traveling like away from the sun constantly because what they're finding is this where the sun is hitting some sort of phenomena is going on where wherever the sun is hitting it's basically killing everyone. And so they're trying to stay ahead of it by flying, by trying their best to like match the speed of the rotation of the Earth.
Yeah.
You know, and it almost feels like it almost feels half like a surreal horror thing and half like the movie Speed because they're constantly trying to like stay ahead of it. You know, so and that's a technology thing because they're getting reports of everything coming in, but it's like while that lasts, you know, it's getting and then once there's just a total blackout from the region, they have to assume everybody there is dead. So you know, yeah, it was decent. But those both involve the technology getting cut out, you know, or
Well, that's what's.
subverted. You know,
How do you feel about the Neuralink? Because people are scared of like having something put in their head. For me, it's not as much like having something put in your head as when it's not supported. Like the idea that like you'd be like Deus Ex, you'd be like, oh, have you been for your update? And it's like the idea that they would be like, yeah, because at the moment, one thing you haven't got a smartphone, so you don't experience this as much, and probably for the best because
well, I
it
do,
would
but
piss
I don't use it like one.
it would piss you off. So you'll buy something, and the only way to use it is with an app. But then the app will be removed from the store, and then the item you've got is fucking useless.
I look at everything on on a smartphone as literally temporary or disposable. Like I look at
Exactly. Yeah.
everything like, well, it's like on my computer. I look at everything on like that I have like on an SSD as I could wake up one day and it's all gone. You know, so
I just read the chat. Subscription fee for thinking. It is like it'll
yeah,
be like.
I would probably
im-
be, assuming we get that far, I would probably be a boomer as far as neurological implants, just because I wouldn't necessarily trust it that we figured it out for the duration of my life that this is safe and yeah.
Imagine you've got all these memories in your implant, and it's like, by the way, your storage is full. We need to delete some memories, and you're having to go through memories. I
Or
mean,
what
I
if it
don't.
gets hacked? Or what if Turns out, guys, this actually does cause cancer, but it takes about 10 years for it to show up. Like, or something like that. You know, I'd
I just
rather.
like the idea of like I get stressed out having to delete photos because I'm like, oh, what photos will I need? Yeah, imagine that in real time with memories. Like that's a Black Mirror episode right in itself. Storage full, they could call it.
Yeah, it's.
But yeah, my
Well,
friend
well,
bought an expensive. Well, not my friend, but a friend of a friend bought an expensive cat litter thing. It's I don't even get me started. But it cleans itself, but it uses an app, and I'm like, you just bought. If they the second they turn that app off, this litter tray is a fucking. It's a piece of trash, really. It's just not
yeah,
gonna
it'd
work
have to be hacked. Yeah, you shouldn't buy that unless you or someone you know has the know-how to turn it into
to
a
fix it.
to turn it
Yeah.
into a modding project. Yeah. Well.
Oh God. Welcome to the future.
Okay, so we'll run through a few more. I don't know how long you want to go, but I figure 3 hours is a while, so we can
Yeah,
run through a few
probably
more questions if you want.
probably. So this one is: do you think? Well, obviously I already know the answer, but it's more the question. Do you think that cheating is cheating, or do you think that if you experience a game and you enjoy it, and from a subjective point of view, do you think that you've cheated yourself by cheating into that? Like with
Oh,
Dark Souls, you could
okay,
cheat
so we're
something.
talking like single player.
Well, just in general. So
Well,
like,
I think it's different for single player, multiplayer because you're cheating in multiplayer. That's coming
oh,
at
that's
the
fun
active
play.
cost of enjoyment to others. So yeah,
Yeah,
you
let's
are cheat.
let's stick with single player then.
Yeah, for single player, it depends. Like if you enjoy the game and you more than you would have had you not used the cheat, then sure. But if you're doing it and thinking like, no, this is kind of too easy now. It's like, okay, that one part was hard, but man, if I had stuck with it, this feels better balanced. And yeah, you are cheating yourself from it. So, but that's a very subjective metric. And I've played plenty of games where once I see what came next, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm glad I cheated." Like this,
Yeah.
if I had tried to tough it out even farther, no, this would have been awful. Like so, but no, there's some that like I feel like it cheats like too much. Like usually if I'm cheating, I want some sort of balance, or I just have zero respect for the gameplay as it is. So no, in
Yeah, I
fact,
recently played Hack, but I
what?
played it. It's called Hack. It's a on the PS2. It's a really interesting premise where it's like the idea is that it's an online game, but it's a single player game. But the whole like plot is that you're in an online game and the online game's like haunted, and people are going into a coma. And it's a game I really wanted to play as a kid, and I'm
Yeah.
so glad I didn't play it as a kid because the end boss is so atrociously designed that I had to just cheat. I had to put cheats. It's the first time I've ever put cheats into an emulator to complete a boss. And I'm like, I wouldn't have experienced this if I was a kid because I never would have got past this boss because it obviously wanted you to grind for about 1,000 hours or whatever. I'm like, no, not doing that.
I played a few games where I made it to the final boss, and I'm just like, no, not good enough. I'll watch it play. I'll watch the ending online from somebody who's more hardcore.
Yeah.
Like, Mother Russia Bleeds was like that. I made it to the end boss, and I was just like, no, I don't want to do this. Slain, that was another one. I,
Slain, which one's that?
it's a platformer where
Oh, yes,
it's
I
like
know
a
Slain.
metal, kind of heavy metal, dark fantasy.
Yeah, I
I
remember.
made it to the end boss. I was just like, no, I don't even want to try this. Uh, the another one, I didn't make it to the end boss, but I made it about 85% through the game, and I was just like, this is getting hard. Like, was it Fight and Rage? It's kind of a beat 'em up, like kind of Final Fight style one, and I was surprised how far I was able to get on it. But then, yeah, I died on Death Island. There was a few too many exploding motorcycles for me to handle. So
There's only an amount of a human being can actually experience exploding motorcycles
well,
until it
you were a
becomes
mutant,
liquid.
but it still was a bit much. I'm sure if I kept going at it, I could have gotten farther. But I'm getting pickier now. There's too many games. Because the thing is,
Well, yeah.
I'd rather be picky and skip the more of the drudgery and play twice as many games, or something like that, or maybe
Well, there's a
more.
question. What games did you complete as a child that you think, oh my god, if I played this today, there is absolutely no way I would have like
That's a
gone through
good
that without.
question, but I'm not sure. I mean, maybe the original Prince of Persia, but I don't know. I found like an exploit in that like I would have kept going if they didn't set you so back so far when you died for some of it, or you had like the finite lives. Uh, no, that is a good question. I'd have to think about it.
Because obviously, we know you didn't do Spider-Bot. We know you didn't do a lot of C64
Spider-Bot was
games.
too cryptic. I couldn't have done Spider-Bot. Yeah, I'm trying
Do
to
you
think.
think if you'd had access to an FAQ, you would have done it, or do you think you
Yeah.
still
Oh
would have
yeah.
been
Oh
like,
yeah. I would have done a lot more games if I had access to a fact. The frequently. Yeah, a lot of adventure games I would have done more of. Yeah, no, a lot of the Commodore 64, I just didn't know. It was like it wasn't a skill thing. It was just like,
yeah,
what is this?
yeah?
So
I still like one of my favorite episodes of yours. Probably it possibly could be the best episode you've done, in my opinion, and that's the Dementia one,
oh
because
yeah, yeah.
truly that game, like the fact that the tester had to release an FAQ on it. And I don't know if you've read much into it, but from what I can tell, the reason the game makes no sense is because it's supposed to be something to do with like their old Jewish jokes from the original language it was like programmed
Oh
in.
yeah, yeah. I got the country wrong. I felt like an idiot about that.
So all the jokes make sense in the original language, but translated, it's like speaking to someone with dementia.
It,
And obviously
it,
they were like, it's a good title
it's
because it is
still
like
a
that.
trip. The thing about that game is the production quality is so
It's,
high for being
it
such
still
a
looks great.
weird, unheard, very few heard of game.
Well,
Like
yeah, like they translated all the songs and they're beautifully like done. I mean, they're horrible to listen to, but they're supposed to
the
be.
game was 5 discs and a lot of CGI graphics and animations and stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean that's kind of an anomaly, but you
It
just
almost feels like one of those money laundering games, but like someone was like, "Oh, we need to like you need to
no,
make a game," and the guy was like, "I'm gonna use all this money and I'm gonna make a great game.
yeah,
I
no,
don't
there
care
was
if it's."
heart that went into that. I
Yeah,
mean, they somebody was really trying to make something
yeah.
good, even though or good for
It's like
them. you
it's like
know?
Warren Spector. You know, they gave Warren Spector all the money to make like Deus Ex. That game is like if they did that, but it turned out horribly.
Well,
Like
I
it's
mean,
the
for
opposite.
some people, that might have been what he wanted. I mean, this could have been like their kind of humor. So.
But that's what I was talking about right at the beginning when we had this conversation. It's like AAA games because they cost so much.
Oh yeah,
Like,
you can't
like
do that because
no one's gonna take a risk. Like I think I can't remember who talked about it, but I remember watching this great video essay where a lot of games want you to complete them now, but back then, like most people felt like if they got far enough for a game, they felt like they'd experienced it. But nowadays, it's like the game is so obsessed with you completing it that they'll just dumb it down to the point where you can get to the end. So they don't take as many weird risks. Like back in the day, they didn't care if you got stuck on disc 3 and you never completed it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think it was even like that they felt like you got enough of it. I think it's just that there was no thought put into it. Like they didn't care. Like,
Yeah.
in fact, I remember being floored at like some games that would just keep going. It's just like, wow, they actually made a full game past this, even though 99% of people were never gonna see this. Like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually okay with that aspect
Oh yeah,
of making
absolutely.
games that they want you to finish it. I'm all right with that. Like,
I think it's well, actually, like there's enough games were made in the 90s that like yeah, you're probably right. It's probably is the best way to do it. But oh my god, like I remember as a kid, I played. It's a game that is really obscure. I feel like one day you'll probably do an episode on it. Have you heard it? It's called not Hotel 9. It's like a pre-rendered Myst clone,
oh
and
wow,
there's a
Secret
guy
of
in a
Nine,
plane.
Secret of Nine, or something like
Yeah,
that.
do you know what I'm on
Yeah,
about? Did you ever
Nine
play it?
Secrets. Oh jeez.
And do you and bloody who's the guy in Taxi Driver? Robert De Niro produced it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't find the game, so I went on to Tip of My Tongue on Reddit, which is brilliant resource if you can't remember a game. And someone instantly got it, and I read into it. I was like, oh my god, the amount of money that went into this game, and no one talks about it nowadays. It's like
Yeah, it
super
has like a
obscure.
picture of like a monkey on the cover or
Monkey
something.
on the cover. Yeah,
I know
yeah,
it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
want to say it's like Nine Secrets of the Soul or something,
Something-
but
No, it's like it's like not hotel, but something nine. Oh my god, let me just put
yeah,
in
I don't know.
PC
I know what you're
nine
talking. Like I would
Robert
recognize the cover.
De Niro. Nine, The Last Resort. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's it.
And like the amount of it's got like loads of voice actors in it, and it's got the guy who did the art is some famous artist. Cher is in it. James Belushi's in it.
Wow,
Christopher
I didn't
Reeve
know
is
it
in
had
it.
like this big cast.
Yeah, it's got Christopher Reeve. Steven Tyler of Aerosmith did like stuff for it. It's insane. Those are the kind of things we don't see nowadays, where an actor was like, "Oh well, video games are the future. I'll just produce a video game," and then he did, and like no one talks about it.
I didn't even know it had all those.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember I played that as a kid, and it's stuck in my brain because there's a. I remember all I put on Reddit was I cannot remember this game. All I remember is that there's an organ puzzle with a clown, and it was pre-rendered Miss Clone, and instantly someone was like Nine: The Last Resort, and I was like, oh my god, like this memory has been unlocked in my head. And then it was just like, and that's why one thing I love about 90s PC games, where you can look at a 90s PC game that's unknown to everyone, like you did with Dementia. Like after you did that episode, the amount of digging I did into that game, because I was like, I've never heard of this game, and it clearly had so much production put into it. It's insane, and there were after Mist, I think after Mist happened, there was so much money being thrown around trying to be the next Mist that we had all these great experiences. And people don't, people do all these episodes on YouTube about unknown SNES games, unknown PlayStation games, but there's probably so many PC
Oh
games just made
yeah.
in the 90s that just haven't been looked at yet. And that's why I love Ross's Game Dungeon, because like you're looking at games I'm just like, I've never heard of this. I think this game would be probably a. I don't know if it would be enough for a game dungeon, but like if someone could one day do an episode just like of any kind of show where they just go through loads of Mist clones, because there's so many. I remember one as a kid I loved was, it's one when you're in, do you remember the one? Have you ever played the one where you're in an asylum and it's your dad's asylum, and you have to like go through his traps, or like it was things that he used to like cure them, but they're like
Well, it sounds a
horrible.
bit like Sanitarium, but maybe.
No, it's not
Okay,
sanitarium.
it's not
It's
Sanitarium.
no, because that's one I used to get it confused with.
There's a lot of
Um,
fireworks going on outside for some reason. Hopefully the mic doesn't pick it up.
no, you can't hear it at all. Don't worry. Give me a sec. Asylum, 90s Mist clone.
Well, we should maybe wind it down soon anyway.
Yeah.
Any like burning questions you want to ask, or should we?
Let me just have one last look. Oh, that was it. Very, very important.
Okay.
Are you Beavis or are you Butthead?
I mean, I don't think I'd really either, but if I have to choose, I guess closer to Beavis.
Why?
Fire, fire. Like,
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think my id lines up more with Beavis than Butthead.
He has
If I
kind
was
of a
good.
natural urge for destruction, is what you're saying.
Well, it just destruction or just seeing, raising hell to some extent, or yeah, just I'm trying to find the right word for it. Like, I mean, one of my favorite episodes is where they steal the riding lawnmower and just start going over it. Just go on a escapade with it. So
Actually, one last thing. So, I was watching loads of Beavis and Butthead because I didn't watch it as a kid. I kind of missed out on it
yeah,
being
me
in the
too.
UK.
I caught up though.
So I watched, and oh my god, it's such a nightmare finding all those episodes for that whole other thing. But one thing I was like surprised at, because I love 90s music, the amount of amazing 90s music I found for that show that are like completely obscure. So there's one. Have you heard of Helmet?
Yeah, I wrote when I went back and finally caught up,
You just wrote them all down. Yeah.
every band that I liked, I would just wrote down the
Yeah.
band name during the.
Yeah.
So I have this giant list. I'm sure Helmet's on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So Helmet are like a metal band, but they kind of. I was surprised how much they push forwards post metal, which is bands like Pelican and Earth and Isis and stuff like that. And recently I was like, I really want a Helmet shirt. Like I want a helmet. So I went through and I was looking for helmet shirts, like vintage ones, and I noticed they were like $300. And I was like, what is going on? Why are people selling helmet shirts for $300? So then I noticed that there's a fashion brand called E Saint Laurent. They made a helmet shirt, a band shirt based on one of their original designs, and sold it for $650, and it sold out. And I was just
That's
like, I feel
weird.
like I'm taking crazy pills right now. Why have they picked this random band that I only discovered through Beavis and Butthead, and they're selling it for $650, and someone bought it?
I don't. And then this is like a reprint.
Yeah, it was a reprint
Yeah,
of a
yeah.
shirt.
Okay,
Like,
like I mean, I could almost. It still seems too high, but I could almost see if it was like a limited run like band tour shirt that like
yeah,
there's like 20 of them out there and
yeah,
it's a niche market. Okay, but like a reprint, what?
yeah. Well,
You know,
it made
why?
it made the second-hand ones look cheap. So, well, I still won't be paying $300 for a helmet shirt, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for talking, Ross.
Sure. Yeah. I hope this didn't go on too long, but
Well, it's dark outside. You can probably see now.
yeah, yeah. It'll probably need to kind of time lapse you later. I picked a bad background. Like I originally was gonna have a Qbert background, but I thought, oh, this doesn't look good. This looks noisy. So I was scrambling. I didn't pick something on time. So this is actually supposed to be Trackmania Valley in the background there. So, but now it just looks like some random photo or something like that. So, oh well. I'll try to get more prepped ahead of time next time. But yeah, it was a
Anyway,
good chat.
yeah,
Some future ones might be more focused on various things. This one's
yeah,
more kind of a
like
free
nuclear
for
power.
all one, but
Yeah, but still, I thought it was interesting, but we'll find out. Anyway, see you soon, Ross.
yeah, see ya. Thanks for showing up.
Bye, everyone. Bye, chat.